This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Now you come to me and you say, Don Corleone, give me justice. But you don't even ask with respect. You don't offer friendship. You don't even think to call me Godfather. This film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. This is easily the highest IMDb ranked film we've done. Until we do Shawshank Redemption, it will remain, I believe, the highest IMDb ranked film we've done. We're talking about The Godfather. If you didn't listen to the prequel or anything, interesting. If you listen to this show for a little bit, you know I have technically a film degree. I had never seen this movie. It's one of those ones that I had just, for whatever reason, never seen. And so this was my first time watching it. It was really interesting, and I'm very excited to talk about it. Also, your first time seeing it.
Yes.
And you read the book, which we'll get into. We have every single one of our segments, and we got lots of notes because there's a lot going on here. So let's get right into it with our first segment, Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
The Godfather, Don Vito Corleone, is the head of the Corleone crime family in New York. He has 4 children: Sonny, who is following in his father's footsteps; Fredo, who is the fail son of the group; Connie, his only daughter, who is married to the scumbag Carlo; and Michael, who at the beginning of the story resents his family's mafia lifestyle and has enlisted in the Army or Marines, we'll find out later, where he became a war hero. I wasn't sure at the time when writing this that it was the Marines. Don Corleone is both respectful and kind while also ruling ruthlessly through violence when needed. A rival crime boss, Sollozzo, comes to Don Corleone with an offer to cut him in on his up-and-coming heroin trade, but Don Corleone refuses, which leads to Sollozzo calling for a hit on Don Corleone that leaves him on death's door. This event thrusts Michael headfirst into the family business despite his initial disdain for their occupation. After killing Sollozzo and a corrupt police captain in order to keep his father safe, Michael escapes to Italy where he meets and weds a local Italian woman. Meanwhile, Sonny deals with Connie and her abusive husband Carlo, which escalates until one day, while on his way to rescue Connie from Carlo, Sonny is ambushed and murdered by rival gangsters. This devastates Don Corleone, and he calls for a meeting with all of the rival crime families in order to broker peace. Upon this peace, Michael is able to return home, now wifeless, after a botched attempt on his life instead killed his wife Apollonia. Back in New York, Michael takes over for his aging father, marries his old fling Kay, and begins a war against the rival families responsible for killing his brother and wife. The wife being the wife in Italy. The story ends with Michael assuming his role as the godfather of the Corleone family, sealing his fate as the tragic figurehead he so desperately tried to avoid becoming. All right, in case you hadn't seen The Godfather, now you know a little bit about what's going on there. We have a Guess Who. It's been a while, but we got one, so let's play Guess Who.
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a couple here. Very excited to hear your guesses. He was tall for a first-generation American of Italian parentage, almost 6 feet, and his crop of bushy, curly hair made him look even taller. His face was that of a gross Cupid, the features even, but the bow-shaped lips thickly sensual, the dimpled cleft chin in some way curiously obscene. He was built as powerfully as a bull, and it was common knowledge that he was so generously endowed by nature that his martyred wife feared the marriage bed as unbelievers once feared the rack.
So this, I mean, the thing that sticks out most to me is that tall, first generation American of Italian parentage would be one of the Corleone children because Don Corleone, Vito Corleone, is from Italy, or like was born in Italy and immigrated. Tall, the bushy curly hair applies to specifically one Corleone, and the face of a gross Cupid really actually it so vividly struck me that that's what that James Caan looks like in this movie. So I'm going to say that this is Sonny or Santino Corleone.
Yes, this is Santino Sonny Corleone. And by the way, every single time we got even a small description of Sonny, we got to hear about his Cupid face. Cupid face. It's all over the book. Every time we talk to Sonny, his Cupid-shaped face.
You know what's funny is that as soon as you read that, and I was already leaning after the curly hair, but the Cupid face completely nailed it in my head. And I don't know if I would have ever, on my own volition, described James Caan's, Sonny in this movie as having a Cupid. I don't think that's just a word I would use. But as soon as you said it, I was like, yep, that totally fits. Yeah.
He did not have the heavy Cupid-shaped face of the other children, and his jet black hair was straight rather than curly. His skin was a clear olive brown that would have been called beautiful in a girl. He was handsome in a delicate way.
Well, this is very clearly Michael Corleone.
Yeah, that is
yes.
Michael.
Fredo does have curly. Well, no. Well, at least at some points he has slicked, straight. When they're in Vegas, his hair's
his
slicked.
hair's slicked
but
back.
It might be curly in the beginning. I can't recall. But the rest of it is. I have a note in my notes. I had a specific note about how young and cute Al Pacino looks in this movie. So,
short, squat, massive skulled, his presence sent out alarm bells of danger. His face was stamped into a mask of fury. The eyes were brown, but with none of the warmth of that color, more of a deadly tan. The mouth was not so much cruel as lifeless, thin, rubbery, and the color of veal.
Short, squat, massive skull. His presence sent out alarm bells of danger. His face was stamped into a mask of fury. So this could be Vito Corleone with the mouth not so much cruel as lifeless, thin, rubbery. His face was stamped into a mask of fury. I don't know if I would call the resting face of Don Corleone in the film fury, but it's definitely not. He has resting, bitch face, for lack of a better description. He has, he doesn't look happy in his neutral state. I also wouldn't call him short or squat or massive skulled necessarily, but he does have a kind of a large head. Because my other thought was, based on the description, was Luca Brasi, but he's gigantic in the film. He's a Hulk of a man in the film. He's 6 foot
a
6
refrigerator of a man,
and just gigantic. He's not short and squat. But the rest of that kind of fits for him. I'm trying to think. The other one that kind of works would be Sollozzo. He's not short and squat necessarily, but he does have dark hair and dark eyes, and he does kind of have. I think it would also make sense in this movie or in the book that this description would be applied to a villain character, and Sollozzo is ostensibly a villain in this story. I'm trying to think who else would make much more. Oh, the other one that who else would make sense actually, but he has giant lips in the film is Clemenza, I believe is his name, or he's the big guy who strangles.
Yeah,
Carlo
he's one of
at
the capo
end.
regime.
Yeah, he's one of the capos. He's the because he's short and big, or relatively short and big, but he has very full lips. I'm gonna say that this is Sollozzo.
This is Luca Brasi.
Oh, so they decided to make him gigantic instead of short. Okay.
I mean, the other stuff is not so.
Like
far
I said,
off,
other than the short,
Yeah.
part, I was like, sure, like this could be Luca Brasi, but he in the film he's a beast. Like I believe the actor who plays him is was like a wrestler or something along
That
those
makes
lines.
sense.
Yeah, he was some sort of like fighter or something.
He was 35 years old, a tall, crew-cut man, very slender, very ordinary looking.
Tall, crew cut, very slender, very ordinary looking. This is so limited that it's very difficult. The one of the people I could think that this might be would be Tom Hagel, if that's his last. I think
Hagen.
it's Hagen. I was thinking of the philosopher Hegel. Hagen, but he's not crew cut. He has just kind of a. It's not a crew cut, but 35 is about the right age, tall, and I could see Hagen having a crew cut like that. That fits for his character. To me, slender and ordinary looking, I think also works. I mean, it's so limited that I'm just gonna say it's Hagen.
It is Hagen.
Hot damn. Again, he doesn't have a crew cut in
No,
the movie,
but
it's not. He
kind
looks
of
like to me what he looks like is a NASA. He looks like he could be one of the engineers who was like in the control room on the moon landing.
Yeah.
And they all had crew cuts, so that would make sense. But like he could have he fits right in with that.
I do think this movie kind of falls in with something that I notice, particularly in movies from the 70s and 80s, where like no matter what period they're set in, the hair really gives away that they were made in the 70s and 80s.
Yes, yeah.
Because Tom Hagen in particular has like 70s hair in the movie. He does not have 40s hair.
And that's why, like that's to me, he fits even the crew cut, or the hair he has, I think, because I also just, as he's depicted in the film, when I said he looks like he would fit into the NASA control room, is like that's the 69 or whatever. So like it's that era where he looks like somebody from the late 60s, early 70s.
Okay, last one. She was all ovals. Oval-shaped eyes, the bones of her face, the contour of her brow. Her skin was an exquisite dark creaminess, and her eyes, enormous, dark violet or brown, but dark with long heavy lashes, shadowed her lovely face. Her mouth was rich without being gross, sweet without being weak, and dyed dark red with the juice of the grapes. She had a crown of ringleted hair as purple-black as the grapes, and her body seemed to be bursting out of its skin.
This seems very obvious that this would be Apollonia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to read that description because wow.
It to me it sort of does, it teeters back and forth between men writing women and just kind of like an okay description of a beautiful woman. Like it bounces back and forth. Like it's
there are some very strong men write women moments in this book.
I can imagine, yeah. I thought she was all ovals, though. It was kind of cute. It's kind of fun. It's just a weird way.
I like that her mouth was rich without being gross.
Yeah,
whatever that
I don't know
means.
what that even means.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I don't know what that means either. That like, feels like there may be some weird inherent like
she's not slobbering.
I almost took it to mean that there might be some weird that almost implies like some weird like racist undertones of like, to me, like rich without being gross, like her lips are very full, but not like she doesn't have giant lips, like gross.
Yeah.
That's my only.
That's also in line with some other elements in this book.
Yes,
so.
That's the only thing I could think that would make, because I don't know what else it would mean necessarily. But that's, who knows? Who knows? All right, we have a ton to talk about. I have so many questions, so let's find out. Was that in the book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
So, like I said, I have a lot of questions, and my first one, quite a few of them are lines. This is one of the most, being one of the most famous, well-known, well-regarded, infamous movies we've talked about. Infamous is the wrong word, but talked about on this podcast. It is also one of the most quoted films ever. There's a couple lines that I actually didn't know came from this, that were popularized in this. One of them, which I didn't have a question about, was blanking. I just was reading about it. Revenge is a dish best served cold. That was popularized in this film, apparently.
Interesting.
I had no idea.
didn't
I
know
thought that was just like, if you had asked me, I just would have assumed that went back forever.
I would have assumed it was Shakespeare or something.
And what I had
think.
read is not that this movie or this story invented that saying, but its popularity is due to
Interesting.
this film. So, one of the most famous lines is, "You come to me on this, the day of my daughter's wedding," or something along those lines. When people do impressions of Marlon Brando, as they are wont to do, or at least were wont to do back in the the 90s and early 2000s, it's died off. The Godfather, the Don Corleone impression is not getting the mileage that it used to in terms of like, you could not go a week without seeing somebody on like a comedy special or SNL or some TV show or something, somebody doing an impression of Marlon Brando in this movie. And that has died out, which is nice. Because it's a really great performance. And I mean, I guess so that's why it was, mocked, or not mocked, but emulated and used for comedy so much. But this specific line, "You come to me on this, the day of my daughter's wedding," or whatever it is, does that come from the book?
It does. I actually think this was really interesting because the line that you said is the line that everybody says.
And I don't think that's even the line
No,
in the
it's
movie.
not.
Even-
You come to me on this, the day of my daughter's wedding, is what it has become
Yes,
in popular culture.
It's the same thing as Luke, "I am your father." It's like that, yeah.
In the book, it's "You come into my home on the bridal day of my daughter."
Yeah.
And I believe what he said in the movie, I forgot to write it down, but I believe he said, "You come to me on this, the day of the wedding day of my daughter."
No, yeah, I think it is the wedding day of my daughter. Or something like that.
So,
But he
like,
does say it
close.
twice in the movie, I think. I think he actually says it 2 times in slightly different ways. But yeah, I think neither of them, I don't believe, are "You come
neither
to
of
me on
them
this, the day of my
are the
daughter's
line
wedding."
that it has morphed into in the collective consciousness.
Which is really interesting. Very interesting. I'm going to double check that one. Make sure that that's actually true. "You come to me on this, the day..." So he says in the film, "You come into my house on the day my daughter is to be married."
Yeah.
And I believe he also says a different version at a different time, similar, but again, not the right line.
Yeah.
So, or not that exact line. So anyways, sorry. Were you going to finish? Was there anything else you had to say about that? Or?
No, I just think it's really interesting that line has completely morphed in our collective memory of it.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things. It can probably be tied to whoever did the first, or if whoever was the person who, some comedian or something, or somebody on SNL or whatever who did an impression, was doing lines and did that line that way, and then everybody copied it. It would be my guess.
I'm sure you're right. I'm sure, or maybe didn't want to do the exact line.
Yeah.
So just modified
Got
it a little
close,
bit, and now that's what everybody remembers it as.
It's interesting. So at the wedding of Connie's wedding, there's a bunch of stuff going on. There's a photographer who shows up, and at one point he's snapping pictures at the party. And he takes a picture of, I don't even remember if we know who it is. It's some guy at a table. I don't even remember.
Well, there's 2 moments. There's the guy who doesn't want his picture taken, and they grab the camera.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
But then there's 2 moments of that. There's a guy, and he's taking a Polaroid, I think, and they grab the picture.
It's not a Polaroid. It's the 40s, but they pull the slate or whatever out of the camera.
Yeah, the slate out of the camera, and then there's another moment later where Sonny grabs the camera from him and smashes it on the ground.
That's not 2 moments. That's the continuation of that moment. So in the party, he takes a picture of somebody, and they grab the camera out of him, and then they kick him out of the party. And we see Sonny roughing him up outside and get out of here, and smashes his camera.
Okay, I guess I thought that was 2 different guys then.
No, my understanding of what happened there was we just saw the scene with Sonny moments later is just them kicking him out of the party because he was taking pictures of people he wasn't supposed to.
Okay.
And so it was I could be wrong, but I
thought it was 2 different people, but I guess it was not. At any rate,
my question was whether or not him taking pictures of somebody and then them grabbing him and pulling the film out of the camera happened in the book, because I thought that was funny.
That's not from the book, but I did really like that addition. I thought it was funny and made a lot of sense.
Yeah. Does Michael? So we're introduced to Michael Corleone, and I'm gonna assume this is the case because it's the whole point of the story, and it would be wild if this wasn't true. But we're introduced to Michael, and this was wild to me because I did not know that this was the point of the film. I literally somehow have escaped everything about this film other than like random lines delivered by comedians. Like that's the only thing I knew about this movie. Like I didn't actually know anything that happens in it or what it's actually about or anything. And we're introduced to Michael Corleone, who shows up late. It's Al Pacino's character in the film. And we kind of find out very quickly at this wedding that he's as he's explaining to Kay, his girlfriend, about what his family does, that he is not into that. He doesn't want to be part of that. He dislikes the fact that his family is part of the mob, is, you know, an organized crime family. And he's trying to, you know, find a different way in life for himself. And he doesn't approve of that from his family. Is that Michael Corleone's sort of deal in the book? Yeah,
when we meet him, he's very adamant about not going into the family business. He wants like a different life with Kay. Yeah.
Okay. That's, like I said, it was just fascinating to me that I didn't know that was the plot of this movie. Because it's the whole point of this movie. Like, it's literally what it's about. And I just had no idea, which is fascinating. Speaking of Kay, she's at this wedding with Michael. And I thought this was kind of interesting in the movie. And I was like, oh, so she's not aware. And which makes sense because he's, you know, this isn't what he wants to do. So it's not something he's proud of or wants to bring up or anything. He's not going around bragging about being in the mafia or whatever. But is this her sort of introduction to the fact that all of Michael's family are part of the mob?
Yeah, they're at the wedding, and Michael tells her the story about Johnny Fontaine and how his dad got him out of the contract with the band leader by threatening to shoot him in the head, basically.
Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting the way that the women in the Corleone family are depicted as like they know.
That's every mob movie, by the way.
But like, do they?
That's every mob movie. I assume that because that's in every mob movie, I assume that is sort of the potentially based on real life. And from what I have read, that is the case, is that they're aware. They're not stupid. Like, they're all aware, but it's like a don't ask, don't tell.
Right.
They're not, you know. And also, it's, you know, it was like a big rule, like the women get left out of the affairs of what,
I notice it throughout the book with, well, Mama Corleone seems a little more on the up and up. But like, I notice it with Kay and with Connie, that like, it seems like they know, but then something will happen and they'll get upset about it and be like, I can't believe that this happened. And I'm like, but girl, you know.
Yeah. So my guess would be what's going on there, and I don't know, again, having not read the book, and the women's roles in this movie are very minimized, despite Kay being a very important character, and like, I mean, so important, we'll talk about it, that the movie literally ends on her. The last shot of this movie is of Kay, and as important as she is to sort of what's going on in the film, we don't actually get a lot, like the women are very much ancillary side pieces to what's going on, and we don't get much time of knowing what they're thinking or whatever. We don't, you know, there's like zero conversations where the like women are chatting about, you know, anything like that. We don't get any of that. But so just guessing based on other things I've seen and stuff, the idea that maybe it would be going, they would be going for in the book here is that they're aware, and the moments where it's almost like a cognitive dissonance, like sort of denial thing of like, they know what's going on, and you know they know what's going on, but they lie to themselves a little bit. And so when things happen or bad things happen and then they get outraged about it or upset, the idea is that they're forced to confront it, when normally they are not forced to confront what their husbands do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like normally they're able to like compartmentalize it away and pretend pretend they have like normal upstanding jobs. And so when they're forced to confront the fact that their husbands are murderers and criminals and whatnot, it thus sparks sort of this like outrage or whatever. It triggers that cognitive dissonance and makes them like it. Yeah, would be my guess at what's going on there. I don't actually know, again, having not read the book, but that's not uncommon sort of narrative in these types of stories, or not an uncommon characterization of wives and stuff in mobster movies and that sort of thing. So the potentially most famous line in the movie, probably top 2 or 3, is "Make him an offer he can't refuse." It's said first in this movie, which I didn't realize, by Michael, when he says, "My father made him an offer he couldn't refuse," when he's talking to Kay about the story about Johnny Fontaine. But then very shortly after in his office, Vito Corleone does say, "I made him an offer he can't," or "I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse." Does that line, one of the most famous lines in film history, come from the book?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Verbatim, unlike the last famous line we
Yes.
talked about. And it is repeated several times throughout the book, as well as it is at the movie.
Yeah. All right, we talked about in the prequel episode the infamous horse head scene. Johnny goes, or not Johnny, Tom Hagen goes out to LA to help Johnny get a film role. He's talking to a producer. The producer's being a shithead. And so Hagen murders his horse and leaves its head in the producer's bed as a threat. Does that happen in the book?
Yes, it does. It might be more horrifying in the movie. Because in the movie, he like slowly wakes up and he's like laying in a pool of blood.
Yeah, he like slowly pulls down the blankets and is finding more and more blood. And it's like, what
and
the hell?
there's no description of excessive amounts of blood in the book. So
okay. So it's just like that's definitely more horrifying because he doesn't like he doesn't know what happened at first. Like he doesn't and then it's like a.
But the horse does lose his head in the book, and it is in Jack Woltz's bed.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. Another thing that has entered the cultural consciousness that, had you asked me before reading the book or watching the movie, I would have thought was going to be like a way bigger and more important part of the overall story was the horse's head.
I was going to say the same thing.
But it's kind of like just a one-off moment.
It's like a side plot. Like it is. It's a complete side plot. I mean, it's there. It helps establish sort of the ruthlessness and their motive or their modus operandi, that sort of thing, and how they operate. But I thought the same thing. If you had asked me, I would have said, that because I knew of the scene, and I would have assumed it happened to like one of the rival gangsters.
Yeah, I would have
at the beginning of the third act. Or something like that.
Yes, I would have assumed it was like a second act climax or something.
Yeah, exactly. I would never have guessed it was like just randomly in the beginning of the movie to a character who we never see again. It's not really important. It is interesting. So I had a moment watching this movie where Don Corleone is out shopping for peppers and whatnot in the street, and then some hitmen show up and just like unload into him from 3 feet away, and I was like, oh, I had no idea Don Corleone died in like the first 30 minutes of this movie. Again, because I knew nothing about this movie, I was like, holy cow. Because we watch them, they come up and they shoot him so many times.
Yes, I had a note about that in the movie. I was like, I made my note about it happening, and then I was like, oh, I don't feel like he would have survived that.
Yeah. And now, to be fair, I guess I think part of the idea is that they miss quite a bit, like because they shoot a lot of times, and we find out later
they basically
he gets
just
hit.
Spray bullets.
Yeah, he gets hit like 5 times, which is still a lot of bullets to survive in the 40s or whatever. So, but he gets shot a bunch of times, and I straight up thought he was dead. Like in that moment, I was like, oh man, I did not realize. And then, and I was like, I felt like there were other scenes, whatever. But he does survive. But I wanted to know, does he get, is there an attempted assassination on Vito Corleone in that first act that sort of sets everything in motion?
Yes. That assassination attempt does happen. What we see in the movie is basically what happens in the book. He's like picking out fruit and they roll up and unload on him. And it does happen in chapter 2, literally within the first 80 pages of the book. We actually find out that he got shot when Michael sees the newspaper, which does happen in the movie, but it happens after we see him get shot. So Michael sees the newspaper that says he's been killed. Then we cut to the scene where he actually gets shot, and we don't find out that he's still alive for like another 10 pages after that.
Which the movie kind of does keep in the sense that it gives us a little bit of time. Like, because I wrote that note, and then, I mean, it's not a long time, but it's at least 5 or 6 minutes, I think.
Yeah, with a little bit of time where we don't know.
We don't know if he lived or not. And then, you know, then we find out after a few minutes, like, oh, he is still alive, and they don't know if he's going to pull through. And then a few minutes after that, we find out that he's going to live. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. And yeah, he's shot while attempting to buy fruit. So Luca Brasi, who we talked about, was one of the descriptions, and guess who? I did not expect this scene at all either. But he is the muscle for Don Corleone.
He's the enforcer.
He's the enforcer, and Don Corleone has him, and this is actually prior to Don Corleone being attempted to be assassinated. But he after the whole Sollozzo tries to get Don Corleone to make a deal with him so that they can run drugs together, and he turns him down and doesn't let him do it, and then that's when all this stuff pops off. But Don Corleone has Luca Brasi go investigate, kind of like do reconnaissance and see, try to figure out what's going on with Sollozzo and that sort of thing. And Sollozzo figures this out and ends up Brasi goes to their bar or something, and they kill Brasi, which I wasn't expecting that. I knew somebody was going to die in that scene, but I didn't think it was going to be Luca Brasi. But he was very well known apparently for wearing a bulletproof vest. We see him put it on in the scene as he's getting ready to go to this bar. And through my reading afterwards, apparently it's a thing. He just always wore this bulletproof vest everywhere. And after he's murdered, Sollozzo sends the Corleones the bulletproof vest wrapped around a tuna or a mackerel or something.
Some kind of big fish.
Some kind of giant fish. And the one of the people there says, "That's a Sicilian message. That means Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes." And I wanted to know if that came from the book because it made me laugh. And I also don't know if this is where, and it might be, I guess I could have Googled it, if this is where sleeping with the fishes comes from. Or if it's previous to this and this movie just uses it.
Yes, this is from the book. They do send his bulletproof vest with a dead fish in it. I love this so much. It's so dramatic and theatrical. It's practically camp, and I love it.
Yes, absolutely. It's incredible. And it's much older than that, by the way. It was popularized in The Godfather, but the earliest known record is 1833, apparently.
There you go.
Yeah, no, it's a ton of fun, ridiculous, and amazing. And just like, it's so ridiculous. It's just so ridiculous. It's like you would come up with that saying and then be like, how can we send this, like, you know, like somebody at some point said, he's sleeping with the fishes. And then somebody's like, I got a great idea.
Like I said, it's theatrical.
Yeah.
It's give him the old razzle dazzle.
Yeah. I also like to think, I was also thinking about it in regards to if they did this for other people, what they would do. Because, you know, he was very known for wearing this bulletproof vest. And it was like, if somebody who didn't wear a bulletproof vest, which was like everybody back then, like, I guess you could be like their suit jacket or something, but you wouldn't necessarily know that it would have to be something, you know, specific enough. And so I was thinking like
signature item.
And so I was thinking like, how hilarious would it be? Like, because it had to be something like a necklace or a ring. And so like you would get like a mackerel that just like had like a...
Stick it on its fin.
Yeah. Like a ring around its fin or something, you know, like it would have to be like a piece of jewelry or something, or like a wristwatch around its tail or something. Like, I don't know. It's just very funny to me. So we talked about this a little bit in the prequel episode when Paulie, who's one of the soldiers or something in the Corleone crime family, who they realized was
He was a rat.
He was a rat. I think it's Clemenza and somebody else takes him out into the countryside, and they kill him. And Clemenza goes out to pee in the bushes, and then he comes back, and they're like, "Let's get out of here." And Clemenza says to the guy, because his wife told him as they were leaving, "Don't forget to pick up my cannolis." He says to the other guy there, "Leave the gun, take the cannolis." And it's a great line, but does it come from the book?
That one does not come from the book. That is a movie edition.
It is a movie edition. I knew that, but I asked anyways, just for the sake of full, because it's super interesting. Not only is it just in the movie, it was apparently improvised. Like that actor came up with it kind of like on the spot. Like it wasn't written in the script, supposedly. So after Don Corleone, he ends up in the hospital, recovering from his assassination attempt, and Michael is going to visit him and see him after this. And when he gets there, he realizes that like the guards that are supposed to be there watching him are gone, and like everybody's gone. And he's talking to the nurse, and she's like, "Yeah, they got rid of the guards. They told him they had to leave, and blah blah blah." And Michael very quickly realizes, oh, something's up. They're gonna come try to kill him. And he has him and the nurse move his Don to a different, or Vito to a different room, and then kind of sit there and wait. And then ultimately he goes outside and like pretends to be like Muscle, like him and
Enzo, the baker's boy.
Yes, and go outside and like pretend to be like Muscle, like guards protecting, because these other gangsters roll up in a car, and then they see them and they're pretending like they have guns, and they kind of drive off, and ends up saving his dad. Fascinating scene. In particular, there's one moment that I loved, where after they move him, Vito, into a different room, that he starts hearing footsteps coming down the hall, and Michael is like hiding in the room, and there's like this shot of his face like halfway against in the window of the door, and these like echoing footsteps, and it's so tense and it's so great. Loved that moment. But does that scene, is that how it plays out in the book?
Yeah, all of that is from the book. He gets to the hospital and there appears to be nobody there. So they move his dad, and then he has to go stand outside with Enzo and pretend like there are still guards at the hospital.
So then after he's outside pretending to be Muscle, the cops eventually do show up. And when they show up, we're introduced to Captain McCluskey, who we find out eventually is in the pocket of Sollozzo, one of the rival gang members. And he's given Michael's guff for, I don't even remember why, just because he can. And he ends up beating the shit out of Michael. Punches him in the face really hard. And in the film, he ends up like breaking his cheekbone or something. And I want to talk about that more in a second, but I want to know if that happens in the book.
Yes, it does. I would say that his injury sounds gnarlier in the book than what it looked like in the movie. In the book, 3 of his teeth get knocked out, and his jaw has to be wired back together. In the movie, he just kind of swelled up.
Yeah, he swells up a lot. So I thought that was really fascinating. And I wanted to know, so I think the jaw wiring shut even works for what I got from that. And so I want to clarify or specify that a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, because this is my first time watching this movie. Not only is it my first time watching this movie, it's the first time I like I said, I didn't know anything about this movie. So if you're a big fan of this movie, or have watched like, there's been so much scholarship about this film and stuff, that a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about is probably like very old news to lots of people, or like, yeah, duh, or whatever. But to me, I just thought it was really interesting, so I wanted to talk about it. And this is all purely coming, again, from my brain, because I didn't even know what happened. I didn't even know the plot of this film, let alone like imagery and symbolism and stuff that's going on. But I thought this was really cool, like really great sort of moment, because Michael, as we talked about, doesn't want to become part of the family, blah, blah, blah. He doesn't want to be a mobster, but he loves his father very dearly. And it's very clear in the scene where he goes to visit his dad in the hospital how much he cares about his father. And their relationship and that sort of thing. And this moment where he protects his father, and then as a result of that, the cop breaks his cheekbone or whatever. In the film, the following scene, his face is all swollen up, And I just love that he literally sort of halfway transforms into his father, because I mean the most recognizable physical characteristic of Don Corleone in this film is the way he talks and his jowls
Yeah,
and
his
like
big
his
cheeks.
cheeks and that sort of thing. And so that swelling and the way it affects the way Michael talks,
Yeah.
it's so brilliant to, again, as this physical signifier of the path that he is now on to becoming his father, physically reflected in his face is amazing. And again, I know this is not like novel. I'm sure this is not novel sort of observations about this movie, but for somebody who's never seen it, I was like, wow, this is really great. And so it is interesting to see. Now, I guess to clarify, does Don Corleone, is there, I guess it would be hard to know unless we got a very specific description. Does he talk like he does in the movie, or does he have the jowls, or does he, you know what I mean? Does he?
I don't recall any description of how he talks. And there might have been little descriptors of what he looks like here and there, but I didn't.
I mean, you didn't have a guess who for him,
note.
so it couldn't have been like, it wasn't a big.
I didn't have any notes about it in my reading notes.
Yeah.
Which means that either there wasn't any description of him, or it was just like little bits scattered here and there and not like a complete description.
Yeah. Well, if that's the case, and we did talk about how in the prequel that Marlon Brando put the cotton balls in his cheeks for like the audition basically for this movie, or for the test record for this movie, because he wanted him to look like a bulldog. And it sounds like that was like Marlon Brando's sort of idea or whatever for the character. But it's so fascinating to me that they would take then that characteristic of Don Corleone and then translate an event that happens in the book with Michael getting his cheek broken and swelling up and stuff, and translate that so beautifully into such a direct, symbolic sort of transformation of his character that sounds like it's not potentially not as much as significant in the book as it is in the movie. You know what I mean? Like, to me, at least from what you said, and I'm not, again, I know that there's a lot, there was a lot going on. So if somebody knows the book really well and is like screaming or whatever, then just forgive us. But it would be very fascinating to me if the movie took that event and created this extra layer to it. It was like super awesome.
Well, I'm doing a little bit of a search in my ebook here, because the injury to his face in the book, he ends up becoming like disfigured from it. And it is discussed that that disfigurement has an effect on his personality, and kind of like pushes him more towards this role of being like this mobster, this like mafioso character.
I actually don't really like that necessarily.
And I'm trying to remember if anybody ever alludes to it making him look more like his dad.
Right.
And I don't think so, but I'm not 100% for sure.
But even just the idea that the fact that you got the inclination that the actual physical disfigurement of his face was something that like pushed him towards this, because that's not what I got in the movie. The fact that his face got fucked up for a while was not what pushed him into this.
Well, no,
in any way, but
no, I mean it's not in the book either. But it's how do I explain this? How do I describe this? It's something that happens to him that he then like
sort of internalizes.
So yeah, he sort of internalizes it. The fact that he now like looks like a villain.
Right. I guess that makes sense. And you could read I think a similar idea from the movie to some extent. I don't disagree. I just think, like I said, to me, I just thought it was so brilliant that for us as the audience, it's so, he becomes his father physically to some extent at the time where he makes the decision to enter
Yes.
or at least to some extent enter into the family deal, and the instigation for that, getting his jaw broken in that isn't in the movie, at least isn't what, and I don't think you're saying it is in the book either. That's not what spurs him to this. It is truly just his love for his father and his desire to protect him and care for him that pushes him into this. But as a result of that love and protection of his father is what gets his jaw broken or his cheek broken or whatever. And then that, he then he physically manifests it as his father slightly for a while. And then that, I don't know. Everything about it I thought was super great, super fascinating, super interesting. And it sounds like, at least to some extent, there's elements from the book that they were definitely pulling from, if not maybe quite as explicitly symbolic as the movie is, because we don't know if that physical sort of similarity is as similar. Like, the physical similarity in the movie is very clear. Again, his voice, he talks a little bit like Don Corleone after he gets his cheek broken, and he has that, the swollen kind of jowly look of his father. And it sounds like maybe that doesn't come as much from the book, because we don't know that Don Corleone looks like that in the book or talks like that. But he does in the movie, and I thought that was just fantastic, amazing. So Michael then decides ultimately that Sollozzo's not going to stop until he kills Don Corleone, so they need to do something about it. They need to kill Sollozzo and the police chief, or police captain, McCluskey. And the McCluskey one's maybe a little bit more motivated by personal spite than than practical reasons. Like, Sollozzo, it makes sense. Like, he's gonna kill our dad. McCluskey, if you killed Sollozzo, McCluskey'd probably, you could probably just bribe McCluskey, but McCluskey was a dickhead and he wants to take him out. So they as when he decides that they're gonna do this, Michael says to Sonny, "It's not personal, Sonny. Strictly business." Another great line, and I wanted to know if that came from the book.
Yes, they do say that in the book several times, in reference to the Don being shot, and in reference to other things throughout the novel as well, but most specifically in reference to that assassination attempt. It's not personal, just business.
I mean, later on in the movie, Abe Vigoda's character, Tessio, says a very similar thing. He says, "Tell Michael it was, it wasn't personal, it was business," or something like that. This is almost a lost in adaptation, but I wanted to know if it was in the book, but then also if you had more explanation, because I thought the book might go into more detail about this. When they're planning the assassination of Sollozzo and McCluskey, they're talking about, planting a gun for Michael so that he can get the gun and kill him. And they say something, and then it happened so quick I missed if there was more information about the gun having the handle wrapped in tape or something, and the trigger, and I missed what the point of that was, or what. And my only thought was it had something to do with not leaving fingerprints. Or something, which I was like, wait, were fingerprints a thing in the 40s? Maybe. I think so. I think they were, but I'm not positive. And so I wanted to know if the tape thing was in the book, and if you had any more information about that.
Yes, but also no. I don't have more information about it. In the book, they say that the gun has special tape on it that stops it from picking up his fingerprints.
Okay, so it is specifically about fingerprints.
Yes, it is about fingerprints.
Okay.
And I don't know if that would be something that exists. And I guess it must be, because this book is very grounded in reality.
Yeah.
But in the movie, it just looks like duct tape.
To me, what it looked like, and I could be wrong, and I'm sure somebody knows, because I'm sure this has been thoroughly, explained or explored at some point. It looks to me like duct tape on backwards, like the sticky side out.
That seems like it would pick up his fingerprints more.
I agree. I don't know. I don't know what it. Somebody, if you know, love a comment. I could probably just Google it and find out. But if you have that little tidbit of knowledge,
explain
please let us know
to me the special tape.
What's going on with the tape and why that doesn't leave fingerprints? Because gloves. I guess the idea is that if he's wearing gloves, it's very obvious.
Right.
But still, I don't know. whatever.
Yeah, because they just say like Clemenza gives him the gun and he's like, "Don't worry about fingerprints. We got special tape on this gun." And I
Yeah.
was like, "Okay."
And that was my extent of basically what happened in the movie. And so I was like, was that okay? All right, whatever.
I guess.
Yeah. So then we get to the meeting with Sollozzo and McCluskey. They're at this small Italian restaurant having dinner. And they're talking. And at one point, Sollozzo says to McCluskey, "We're going to talk in Italian." And McCluskey's like, "Yeah, that's fine." And they start speaking in Italian. And it seemed to me, and I could be wrong, none of this is, in the film, none of their conversation is subtitled. So we don't have
Correct.
any idea what
Yeah.
they're saying. At times throughout the movie, and I thought this was really interesting, I actually enjoyed it quite a bit, they subtitle what's important, and then other times they don't subtitle when I think we're not, what they're saying, it's almost important, it's almost more interesting that we don't know what they're saying in those moments. But anything that we need to know specifically that they say in Italian is subtitled. But this whole scene, they converse for a while in Italian with no subtitles, so we don't, if you don't speak Italian, you don't really know what they're saying. I heard a couple words that I knew, but other than that, and I was wondering, it seems like in the film, and I could have been interpreting this wrong, that at some point Michael is struggling to find a word or something, and then just switches back to English.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that in the film too. It seemed like that was what happened.
It seems like he gets frustrated that his Italian is not very good.
Yeah.
And just switches back to English. And then Sollozzo switches back to English, and they just speak English the rest of the time. And I thought that was really interesting that they both, Sollozzo speaks Italian, so like it's initially seemingly to like, so they can talk without McCluskey knowing what they're saying. But also I think ultimately it kind of felt to me like this weird thing of like, because a big theme in the movie kind of, at least to me, feels like this push and pull between the old ways and the new ways. Like that's a big theme throughout.
Definitely a theme in the book as well.
And so there's this commitment to trying to do things the old way in some way. So he's like, "Let's speak Italian." And then Michael's like, "I don't fucking speak Italian." Like, not really. Like, he does a little, but not, like, great. And he gets frustrated and he switches, and that's sort of signifying Michael being sort of
like
the new way. Like, part of the new way. But also, I thought it was this interesting idea of, like, this false... Because Sollozzo doesn't question it. Once he switches to English, Sollozzo just switches back to English and speaking English. Like, he doesn't say anything about it. And it almost felt like Sollozzo was like, "Oh, thank God, we don't have to put up this..." You know what I mean? Like, it all felt like a show. Like, it all felt like this show that eventually Michael's like, "Enough of this dumb fucking show. Let's just talk." Which I thought was really fascinating, and I wanted to know if that came from the book.
That specific moment does not happen in the book, no. Something maybe kind of similar, but not really, now that you've expanded more on on your point. After Michael gets the gun and he goes back to the table, it's mentioned that when Sollozzo talks, he just hears gibberish.
Yeah.
But I think that has more to do with him being like adrenaline.
State of mind,
and,
as opposed to...
Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. I thought there was so much going on in that little moment, that decision to speak Italian and then switching off of it. It's so much. There's so many layers to that that I was like very fascinated by. And then ultimately, Michael he gets the gun and he murders Sollozzo, and Captain McCluskey leaves the restaurant and then is scurried away to Italy.
Spirited away.
Is that what happens in the book?
Yes, that is what happens. He gets them both. He has them sleeping with the fishes.
Yep.
And then he is whisked away to the Italian countryside.
While he's in Italy, and I thought this was really fascinating, and I want to know, this is another thing, this is one of those other things where like, surely people have talked about this, but I don't know, because it seemed really strikingly obvious to me that this was what they were going for. He gets to Italy, and as soon as we get there, there's very little, this movie does... One of the things that's very fascinating about this movie is it sort of jumps scene to scene in media res. We get very little establishment for where characters are and why. Or not why, I mean, we know why they're where they are, I guess, but there's very little, we don't get like introductory scene. We don't see Michael like landing in Italy from getting off the plane and like being welcomed by you know what I mean? Like we don't get those kind of scenes, which you typically would in a movie like this. We just cut and he's in Italy and has been there for some amount of time. And he's wandering through the Italian countryside with these two bodyguards, these two guys who are like strapped with ammunition, carrying shotguns or whatever. And they're both kind of dressed in black. I mean, they're like suits, or they're not suits, but they're like white shirts with like black kind of whatever. And I thought it was really striking to me that these two guys like kind of flank him and follow him everywhere. And we get this montage set to the Godfather theme song. And it was almost like he had these two specters of the two men he killed sort of following him through the Italian. To me, it seemed very striking that was the imagery that they were going for with having these two guys following him around. And I wanted to know if those guards, any of that stuff comes from the book, or if you got that idea from the book. My weird, not weird, but my sort of symbolic interpretation of it, if you got any of that from the book or anything like that.
That is what happens in the book. He's in Italy, staying under the protection of the local Don, and those two guys are his bodyguards. So they go everywhere with him. He can't go anywhere by himself. I didn't get that read on it that you got from the movie. Then again, I do think it is a more visual.
It's very much a visual thing. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I would think of that reading it. Introduced to these characters, but just seeing it again, set to the music and these wide shots of him walking across hills and these two guys just following him everywhere. Yeah, I was like, I couldn't not get that reading of it, of them kind of representing, the people the two guys he just murdered. Because until this point, he's not he was in the Marines and presumably killed people, but in war, in a situation where in his head he wasn't murdering people, he was fighting in a just war or whatever, and that sort of thing. But anyways, I thought that was very, very striking, very interesting choice, but not like they invented it. It is what happens in the book. He has those two guards. So back in America, Sonny is dealing, as I mentioned in the let me sum up. He's dealing with Connie and Carlo and their horrible relationship and Carlo's abusiveness. And at one point, Connie calls him as like, you need to come pick me up. I'm done. Come get me. And Sonny races off to go get her. And he stops at a toll booth. And as he's at the toll booth, a bajillion gangsters roll out of cars and out of the other toll booths and they shoot him so many times.
They wanted to make really sure they got him this time.
They make very sure that he is dead. He gets shot so many times. And I wanted to know if that is the Toll Booth Massacre comes from the book.
Yes, it does.
My second question, we do find this out eventually in the movie, but at the time I was like, I wasn't sure how this all, and I'm still a little fuzzy on it. Ultimately, I think we find out that Carlo was somehow responsible. But I was like, wait, so his sister called him and he rushed off to get her and he stops at a toll booth and somehow all of these gangsters knew he would be there in that moment and set up this ambush for him. How? Like, I was very confused. Yeah. And again, we ultimately find out that somehow Carlo was involved, but I'm still not sure how. Because at the end, Michael confronts Carlo and he says, oh, the thing with Sonny. And he says something about like, oh, you thought, your ploy with Connie fooled us or whatever. And I'm like, well, but didn't Connie would have had to be the one talking to Michael. So did Connie knowingly lure, or not Michael, Sonny, did Connie knowingly lure Sonny into this trap or unknowingly lure? I just wanted to know, this is kind of a loss in adaptation, if that's expanded on in the book, if we get any more explanation of how that all played out. Because I was a little confused at how that happened.
Okay, so by the end of the book, All we really know is that Carlo was approached by Brazzini, who was another crime boss.
Yeah, he's the guy at the end, and we
Yeah.
find that out in the movie, and that part
Yes.
wasn't confusing to me. Was that Carlo somehow
Yes, and then
did something because of Brazzini? But
he was approached by Brazzini, and then he orchestrated the fight with Connie so that she would call home and
okay.
Sonny would rush over, because it was previously established when Sonny rushed over to Carlos' work and beat the crap out of him by the
Yes.
fire hydrant, because it was previously established that Sonny was willing to rush over to defend
Okay.
Connie.
Okay. So he did he got in a fight with her knowing that she would call him and that he
Yeah.
would come over. Okay.
Yeah, so I think what we're supposed to assume happened is that he's approached by Brazzini and he says, I know how I can lure Sonny out.
Okay, that makes sense. And that was roughly what I thought. I was just a little confused at the specifics of how it all transpired, but that makes perfect sense. And in the aftermath of Sonny's murder, he is taken to the funeral home of what's his name, and Vito Corleone goes to see his body there, and he says another line, very famous from the film. Look at how they massacred my boy. Does that line come from the book?
It does. It's very slightly changed. It's see how they massacred my son in the book. But I still had this in better in the book because what we get in the book is we see the Don bringing Sonny to Amerigo's funeral home before we know what happened to Sonny.
Sounds like the book does this a handful of times.
Yes,
where
this
we
book does that a
we
lot.
get the aftermath.
Yes, we
prior
get the
to
aftermath,
event.
and then we pop back and
Yeah.
we find out what happened. And it's really interesting the way that the book utilizes it. But as I was reading it, because we go to Amerigo,
Yeah.
he's the funeral home director, and he gets the phone call from Tom Hagen to be ready.
Yeah.
Because they're calling in their favor.
Right.
And I at first was like, did the Don die?
Yeah.
And then he shows up and he's like, see how they massacred my son. But I'm like, we don't know what happened. We
Yeah.
don't know what happened to Sonny. We know he's dead.
We know it's
he
you do know it's Sonny,
yes,
though?
we know it's Sonny.
Okay. Well, obviously Michael's in Italy,
Right.
but it could be Fredo. Although
He wouldn't be that
he wouldn't
upset
care
about
if it was
Fredo.
Fredo. Nobody would care if it was Fredo.
But we don't know what happened yet. And then we pop back to see how we ended
Right.
up in that place.
Gotcha. Okay. And so I don't know which I prefer. I will say that I like the way the movie does it. I specifically, when you talked about this earlier in relation to Don Corleone's assassination attempt, I was kind of in my head while you're talking about it, I was thinking like, okay, which way do I think would be more impactful? And I do think that the way the movie does it, at least in a movie, is more impact. At least with Don Corleone's assassination attempt, I think seeing it first and being unsure of what's happening the way he is in that moment really works. Whereas if we had known something was going to happen to him because we had seen the newspaper, then I don't know if it would land the same way. I don't know if we would feel that same. And I think the same thing is true here with Sonny. With Sonny's assassination, is that and especially the way the film is shot and the way it's edited, I felt like you live in that. You're caught off guard in the same way that the characters are in the film by what's going on, because he's just like going through a toll booth or shopping for vegetables or whatever, and I feel like if we had known going into those scenes in the film that something was going to happen, because we had seen, if we had done like sort of out of order storytelling and we had known already that they had been shot or murdered or whatever, that I don't know that we would have, that those scenes would be as visceral as they are in the movie.
I can see that. Yeah.
I don't know. But again, not having read the book.
I did really enjoy that style in the book.
And I've read books that do that, and I do like that. And I do wonder if maybe that's something that for whatever reason, and I don't even know what that reason would be. I do wonder if that's something, though, that works better in books than it does in movies. playing that slightly out of order in regards to scenes like this, because there are, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but there are definitely books that I've read, and there are movies that do it too and do it very well, so it can work in movies, but I definitely think that I know there are books I've read where that felt like it works really well, where something is revealed and then we go back and see that thing happen. And obviously, again, movies do that at times too. But something about the way this movie handles those scenes, I don't know if they would work as well were we to know the outcome, or at least something of the outcome going into them.
Well, and I think too, with this movie in particular, there's so much ground to cover that I think a more straightforward linear storytelling just works a little bit better.
Yeah. Also, just as another note, to tie into that, I think it also, because we get unspecified time jumps in the film, that if we were getting unspecified time jumps and unspecified out of non-linear storytelling, that it might get too confusing. Like it might get too sort of like, wait, what is going on? Because it's already a little bit, you kind of have to be there for it with the time jumps and stuff, and kind of, it's masterfully handled in a way that never feels confusing, but it is something you have to be paying close attention to and make sure you realize, because we don't ever get a single subtitle that says 3 years later or whatever.
Yeah.
So if they had done that and done out non-linear stuff, it might have just been too much. So while we talked about it, while Michael's in Italy, he meets Apollonia and marries her. They have a brief courtship, and then he ends up marrying her. He teaches her to drive, and then she gets blowed up. She gets fridged, and I wanted to know if that happened in the book.
Yes, it does. She does get blown up with a car bomb meant for Michael. Initially, seems like it was the rival gang from the next town over.
Yeah, because in the movie we do not know who did. We know friends, whatever his name is, one of the bodyguards planted the bomb, but we don't know who he was working for or why in the film until the end. Ultimately, we do find out. But initially, I did have a question of who did that.
Right. And initially it seems like it was the gang in the next town over trying to get to the local Don that he's staying with, but then later on revealed that it was all paid for by Brazzini. And we see the bodyguard run away. And we actually catch up with him later in the book.
It's like Fabrizio.
Fabrizio, yeah. And he gets fridged in turn.
Oh, in the book?
Yeah.
Maybe we see that in book or movie too.
Perhaps.
Yeah. That's another thing, by the way, that there's a chance that some of the stuff that we may talk about, Katie only read the first book and we only watched the first movie.
This is a 1-to-1 comparison. No sequels.
So there's a chance that maybe some of the scenes or stuff from the book, from this first book, show up in the second movie, and we don't know because we have not seen it. So if there is something where we're like, well, it's not in the movie, it's not in this movie, so it might be in the next one, we don't know. So once Michael gets back to America after Apollonia dies, he decides to reunite with Kay, his American girlfriend, Diane Keaton, who's a teacher, it looks like, a school teacher or something like that. And he meets up with her, and they're chatting, and they kind of have this, she's like, why did you come back, or why are you here, blah, 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 and she doesn't want to get involved in that sort of thing. And she has this line that we both chuckled at, where she's like, oh, it's kind of like chastising him for, being part of the mafia. And he says something about oh, he's a powerful man, like a president or a senator or something, like talking about his dad, I think. And she says, presidents and senators don't have people killed. And we both fucking burst out laughing. And then Michael says, who's being naive now, Kay? Which I thought was great. I do want to clarify, when we burst out laughing, it wasn't in the weird conspiracy theory, the senators are assassinating random people, but more so in the sense of as mechanisms of, as cogs within the and particularly presidents, as levers of power within our our government system, they absolutely are responsible for the deaths of tons of people.
Yeah.
And not in a conspiratorial way, but just in like the reality based way of what heads of government do. But anyways, I wanted to know if that line came from the book.
It is not from the book verbatim, but the point that the mafia isn't really all that different from legal power structures is a recurring theme throughout the book. But God, I loved that exchange.
It's very good. Yes, it was very good. It was very funny. So we have now moved on quite a few years. Michael was in Italy for a handful of years.
He's there for like 3 years.
Yeah, I'd say it was at least a few years it seemed like. And then and now he's back, and it's been a little while since he's been back, and he is stepping into the role, kind of taking over as the boss of the family. He doesn't have like the title necessarily, but his Don Corleone is getting older. And he's kind of semi-retired, they say at one point. And we see in the first scene where we're kind of seeing Michael step into the leadership role, Don Corleone is like shuffling around his office in like pajamas. And I was like, I love that for him. And I wanted to know if Don Corleone is shuffling around the house in pajamas in the book.
I don't recall that he's ever in his pajamas, that it's ever mentioned. I think the closest we might get in the book is his gardening clothes, which is described as baggy gray trousers and faded blue shirt. So.
Yeah, which is roughly what he's wearing, I think, when he's gardening at the end of the movie. Something like that, yeah. I just thought it was... I mean, and again, it's a very good visual way to signify that transition, because, you know, prior to this, every time we see him, he's in a suit.
Yeah.
Or...
Looking very professional.
He's in a suit and tie, except I think the only time he's not in a suit and tie is either when he's like in a hospital bed or after Sonny dies, he's wearing like a night robe. He's wearing like a gown or something. But even still, he's like, it's like a very like fancy, like he has like an ascot, and it's like a, you know, like he looks like, like a very rich person going to bed.
He's not wearing his old gym jams.
Yeah, he's not wearing his pajamas. Anyways, I thought that was fun. So then we jump ahead in the film. We hard cut, and we're just, a car pulls up, and Michael and Kay are in the car with a kid who's like 2 or 3 or something. And it's like, oh, well, it's clearly been, because the last scene we saw was Michael, you know, trying to get back with Kay. Yeah. And now clearly they're now back together, and so back together. They've been married and have a kid, and it's, you know, 3 or 4 years later. And I wanted to know if we get that time jump like that in the film or in the book.
Yes, yeah, we do. After the meeting in Vegas with Fredo and Mo Green, the next chapter after that starts by explaining that Michael has been home for 3 years, been married to Kay for 2 years, and they have a toddler because she got pregnant right away. Yeah. Like a good wife.
Like a good Catholic wife.
And, well, she's not Catholic yet.
Oh, she's
at that
not,
point.
No, but the family
But
is.
yes, like a good Italian Catholic wife. Only one of those she is.
Yeah.
And she's also pregnant again.
Oh. Yeah, that's not mentioned in the movie, I don't think, that she's pregnant. At least I don't think it is. Maybe it is briefly at some point. I just forgot. But anyway, so we've moved forward quite a bit. Don Corleone's even older now, and Michael goes to visit him. He's fully retired, or mostly retired at this point, gardening and hanging out. And him and Michael are having a conversation, and this is where he tells Michael, you know, whoever approaches you and tries to set up a meeting with Barzini is they're a rat. Kind of, you know, letting him know. Anyways, there's this one line in the movie that made us both laugh a lot, and I don't know how this has. I've not seen this meme, and it feels like
it feels ripe for
COVID memes.
Yeah.
Like how was this not? Anyways, but he's sitting there, and he's got a little glass of wine, and he's sipping his wine, and then he turns to Michael. He says, I like to drink wine more than I used to. And I was like, how has that meme not been? And maybe it has, and I just missed it. But like, it feels like that's a peak 2022 meme for sure. Does that line come from the book?
It doesn't. Not in the book.
It's a great line.
I loved it.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I too like to drink wine more than I used to.
Then he gets to play with his grandson, which I don't know if we ever know the name of Do we ever?
No.
I think he does. I think he says it once in the car.
Yeah.
When they first
he
pull
might.
up, I think he says like, "Oh," he says like Michael says his name, and I just can't remember what it is. It might be Vito, honestly. That would make sense, but
Yeah,
who
that
knows?
would make a lot of sense.
But anyways, Vito, Don Corleone's playing with his grandson. He's gardening, and there's this really sweet scene where he cuts a piece of fruit and then he shoves like an orange rind or something in his mouth, and like it's like makes like a weird face at the kid. The kid very real, like this very clearly this kid was not acting. He's young enough that he's not acting, he's just reacting. Like this is just
I loved the little kid in this scene because he was like having him spray the pesticide thing, and this kid was clearly like, I don't know why you're asking me to do this.
Yeah, all of the acting done by the child in this scene is not acting. It's just that kid, like I said, reacting to what is going on. It is
being confused.
and it's actually great because it does. I feel like probably in that moment Marlon Brando was like, "This is the purest acting that has ever." Because Marlon Brando was so big on like
big method guy,
and he's like this. There's nothing more method than a 3-year-old who doesn't realize he's acting. You know what I mean?
He's not wrong.
Yeah. I feel like Marlon Brando is probably probably his favorite day on set was shooting that scene with that kid. He probably loved it, if I had to guess. But he sticks like an orange rind in his mouth and is like making faces at the kid, and the kid is like, ah, and he has to like he like picks up the kid and is trying to like console him and stuff. But then they're playing around in the tomato plants, and Don Corleone has a heart attack and just falls over dead. And I wanted to know if that plays out similarly in the book, because I thought that scene was really beautiful, like in lots of ways.
I really enjoyed that scene. I would probably put that into better in the movie. It's similar-ish in the book, not the same. He is in the garden watering the tomatoes, but he isn't playing with his grandson. When he starts to have a heart attack, his grandson is running towards him. And there's actually like a really beautiful kind of description that he's seeing like this bright white light, and waving his grandson away because he knows that it's death and he doesn't want it to get the little boy. He doesn't want death to get the little boy, so he like takes the death in his stead or something like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of a lovely description.
Do you know where it is?
Give me that book.
Read it. Because in the movie, I as much as I love that scene, and because the other thing I wanted to know, in the movie, the little kid then, after he falls over, comes over and seemingly, you can't tell for sure, but seemingly sprays some pesticide on Don Corleone's body, which is kind of hilarious and also a little, I don't know, I thought it was interesting. But that being said, what you've described from the book sounds potentially a little like, I don't know.
Okay, let me read this paragraph.
Yeah.
Quite suddenly, it felt as if the sun had come down very close to his head. The air filled with dancing golden specks. Michael's oldest boy came running through the garden toward where the Don knelt, and the boy was enveloped by a yellow shield of blinding light. But the Don was not to be tricked. He was too old a hand. Death hid behind that flaming yellow shield, ready to pounce out on him, and the Don, with a wave of his hand, warned the boy away from his presence. Just in time. The sledgehammer blow inside his chest made him choke for air. The Don pitched forward into the earth.
Yeah. No, it's really nice. I mean, it's sad.
Yeah.
Nice in the way that could be nice, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. So then we get to Michael sort of assuming the role, truly taking over, and now that Don Corleone is dead, Tessio comes to him and arranges a meeting with Brazzini, and now Michael knows Tessio is the traitor, and but he sets up he decides, and we don't really know that he's going to do this in the movie. Never like explicitly says what he's going to do here, but he says, "Oh yeah, I'm going to meet with him after I go to my." He's going to become the Godfather for Connie and Carlo's
the baptism.
Yeah, Yeah, it's going to the baptism, and he's going to become the godfather of the baby. And the Godfather, it's layers, baby. But I wanted to know if in the book, Michael Corleone becomes the Godfather while literally becoming a godfather. Because it's cut together where we're cutting back and forth from the church where he's being, they're going through all the rigmarole that Catholics go through whenever they do anything. And he's doing the baptism, and he's becoming the Godfather. And we're cutting back and forth, meanwhile, with his men going out and murdering not all, but a bunch of rival crime bosses and whatnot, including Brazzini and a handful of other important people. Thus cementing his place as the Godfather while he's literally becoming a godfather. And I was like, ooh, that's clean. Good job. That's some good writing. And I wanted to know if that's how it played out in the book.
That's not what happens in the book, but I did really like this change. Better in the movie, in my opinion. What happens in the book is Connie and Carlos' son is actually getting confirmed. So he's not a baby, he's older. And Michael does become his godfather on that day, as part of his confirmation. But the assassinations don't play out intercut.
But it is the same day.
So. Yes, ish. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it doesn't necessarily, you could write it that way, to be fair. You could write a book where we cut back and forth, but that's definitely much more of a film type of thing to kind of cut that parallel action, cutting back and forth. Books don't do that as much. It's a lot harder to read that than it is to watch it. And so I think it's a really good choice. And yeah, I thought I'm a sucker for clever. I thought it was very clever and very well done. And I was like, okay. All right, I get it. I see what you're doing here.
I like the change from confirmation to baptism as well. That's much more recognizable.
Much more dramatic.
To your average non-Catholic person.
Yeah, absolutely.
FYI, I was raised Catholic, so I'm allowed to bag on Catholics.
Both of my parents were Catholic, so.
You're not.
I'm not Catholic, or wasn't raised Catholic. I think I'm still allowed to bag on Catholics. At least to some extent. Then we get to, this is the end of the film. Kay confronts Michael because Connie bursts in. Michael had Carlo killed. Connie bursts in and is like, hey, you killed, did you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And then she basically, because Kay's there as well, kind of dumps out to Kay that, he had all these people killed and he's doing all this stuff. And then Michael and Kay have a conversation, and she directly confronts him and asks him, did you do this? And he says no. And then she leaves, and as she's leaving, several Capo regimes come in to greet Michael and sort of pay their respects as he is the new Godfather. And in the film, and it's brilliant. It's just fucking coming to a party late here with just woo, it's hot take, The Godfather, good movie. I feel like I said, I'm coming to the party real late here. So it's people be like, yeah, man, it's good movie. Everybody knows. It's yeah, well, I had heard, but finally saw it. But she walks out, and they come in and they greet him as the new Godfather. And then that last shot, the door swings shut on him. And then our last shot, I thought it was so fascinating that as much of a sidelined and as, sort of unimportant to the narrative that women play in this movie as a whole, the fact that Coppola chose for the final shot of the film to be Kay, I thought was really interesting. And we last shot is her. She watches the door close, realizes what he's become, and that, that he's lost. And it's so tragic and so it's brilliant. And I wanted to know if that's how the book ends.
So that scene does happen. Kay has just accepted Michael telling her that he had nothing to do with all the murders, but then she sees the others interacting with him and knows that this was all a lie, and he is, in fact, the Godfather. But that's not the end of the book. That's the end of the second to last chapter. the last chapter of the book, we find out that following that, Kay actually leaves. She takes the kids and she goes to her parents' house. She's like, I can't do this. And then Tom Hagen goes, talks to her, and convinces her to come back. And the book ends with Kay in church praying for Michael's soul, which is something that earlier in the book, Mama Corleone told her that she did every single day for Vito.
That's interesting. I like that. And I bet the second movie probably opens with that
Probably,
to some extent.
yeah.
I would say that the movie's version of the ending, I think, is much stronger. Just in my opinion, just from what you said, it's so much more impactful, and it's
bleaker.
It's so bleak, but it also it's so strong. I feel like doing the rest of that, it's like a denouement that kind of just.
We don't really need it.
We don't really need it, and I mean, because there is something interesting there, but it just doesn't feel like the ending would have the same punch that it does if we had then, okay, now she's leaving.
Well,
like, it just doesn't feel like the moment that happens is seeing him become the Godfather and her realizing what that means for her and them, and that's where it ends. That is, it just punches you in the face.
I like the book ending on her praying for him.
Yeah.
Because it's exquisitely set up earlier in the book.
True.
And it's not in the movie. It would
movie,
have to be in the
Yeah.
movie for that to work, I think.
Yeah. I can see that. I can see that. I guess it would also be because I'm comparing in the movie the way that the movie ends, the way it's edited, the way, the door swinging shut, the shot of her. And then I'm thinking, and then what if the movie went on from there? But if they were doing directly what the book did, they wouldn't do that in that part of the movie the same way.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't feel like as much of an ending. They would build up her going to pray more in the movie. So that would probably have a similar punch. That being said, I
don't disagree with you that it is a really good ending.
It's just a brilliant ending. And I was like, okay, all right. Yeah. So good. All right, I have a couple questions for Lost in Adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Where is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
At the wedding at the very beginning of the movie, and I just want to see if there was any explanation or expansion on this, because I couldn't tell for sure what was going on. I couldn't tell. We see some guys that seemingly are feds or cops or something, like looking at all the cars parked in the driveway or out on the street. And they're like looking at the license plates, and I couldn't tell if they were writing like parking tickets or because at first I was like, oh, maybe they're just gonna be writing parking tickets, and this is gonna be like the instigation for sort of a setup or like an inciting incident for like a scene where we get to see like what their deal is, like what the family's deal is. Like somebody's gonna come out and like do a mob thing. You know what I mean? Like, these guys are going to be putting parking tickets on cars, and one of the family members is going to come out and do some mafia shit, and then, like, to kind of set the stage for what's going. So it was either that, or it's like, or are they like, because they were like writing down license plates, like, or maybe they're like getting license plates because they know this is a crime family, so they're getting license plates because they know like a bunch of people here that they can keep track of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what I thought. And so I'm wondering, and then we do find out that they are feds, which makes the second thing way more likely because they wouldn't be giving parking tickets if they're feds. But
like you send out your FBI agents to write parking tickets. Yeah.
But is that happening in the book? And do we know what they're doing there?
That is from the book. We do know that they're FBI agents, and they are taking down license plates. I misunderstood your initial question, I guess, because I answered that it's never explicitly explained like exactly what they're hoping to do.
That was my question. Yeah.
Right, but they are taking down the plates, like presumably because they know there's a lot of like organized crime people at this wedding.
Yeah, that seems like a totally reasonable thing, is that they know, because that's kind of how that stuff seemingly, and I think to some extent still does work, where like, they're kind of keeping an eye, getting information. They know a bunch of people are going to be there. Let's get all their license plate numbers, so if some shit goes down later, we can look at the license plates and know, that sort of thing.
But then, like, later on in that chapter, the Godfather is like, it doesn't matter because I told everybody not to drive their own cars.
That's great. That's not in the movie, I don't think.
No, I don't think it was.
I don't think it was, at least. And then my other question is that at one point, one of the cops, when Captain McCluskey confronts Michael and breaks his cheek, one of the other cops says something about Michael being a war hero. And I was like, well, that random cop said he's a war... And it's never explained. It doesn't really need to be. Like, we know he was a soldier, did something, whatever. And, it's just kind of a little bit of background for Michael. But I wanted to know if the book expands on that at all, if we know why, like, why is he a war hero? What happened there?
So Michael enlisted in the Marine Corps, like at America's entrance to the Second World War. And the book tells us that he rose to become a captain and won a bunch of medals. They specifically mention the Distinguished Service Cross and the Purple Heart. And he was also featured in Life magazine as
wow.
a war hero.
So then people,
so
like
then random people would theoretically know.
Yeah.
That, like, oh, hey, that's that guy.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. All right. That was all of my questions. It's now time to find out what Katie thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
There's a scene near the beginning of the book where we meet Vito's original consigliere.
Was that what he was? Or is this a different?
This is a different. So we meet him because Tom Hagen is at the beginning of the book. He's like a temporary consigliere because the old guy is sick.
Oh, okay.
Like on his deathbed.
Interesting.
But we go to the hospital, and we see him die, and like Vito stays with him in the hospital room as he's dying, and the very upsetting scene where he's begging the Godfather to bargain with death on his behalf.
Yeah. Oof. Sounds sad.
I don't think the movie mentioned this. But the way that they knew that Gatto was the one who betrayed the Godfather was because they have an inside man at the phone company. So they were able to look at his phone records.
Yeah, I don't know if they ever explained that or not.
Yeah, and like
I can't remember.
Like see what like incoming and outgoing calls and who he was talking to.
Yeah, I don't know.
Which, like, if you're dumb enough to do that from your own phone,
Yeah.
like, I'm sorry, Paulie, you
probably
may have
Paulie Gatto.
deserved it. The restaurant, when Michael kills Salozzo and McCluskey, in the movie, they're at a little table. In the book, they're in a booth, which I kind of love because I feel like it just adds to the awkwardness of the situation.
It definitely would have been kind of funny to watch Michael slide in and out of a booth. Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of backstory in this book. We get backstory for like basically every character we meet, almost. And I was okay with losing a lot of it, which I will talk more about later. But I would not have minded getting Vito Corleone's backstory. He had an interesting, like the way that he rose to become the Godfather, which was basically like he did one thing and then kind of just allowed people to believe that he was super duper dangerous.
Yeah. That's a classic hero's, maybe not hero's journey, but like that's a very they reference a movie that I randomly bring up all the time, which is, you're not even gonna know, guess what it is, 2014's Hercules starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I think it's 2014. I don't know what year it was, but 2016, something like that. In that film, that is Hercules in that movie. He's just a big, strong guy. Yeah. And the myths around him far exceed what he actually does. Like, he's not like a god in that movie. He's just a guy. or at least from my memory. And he has like a whole band of people who help him do everything. But in the stories, they pretend, or the stories all say it was just him, but it's like he has like a whole
he just like lets people buy into it.
And it seems like that kind of idea of just like you letting them.
Then and he does murder one guy.
Yeah.
In his backstory, and he's very smart.
Yeah.
Very clever, and he does do some crime. But like in general, like once his reputation kind of gets rolling, he's just like, okay, yeah, I'm the Godfather, sure.
There you go. I will say, just for people that are, again, before you write all your comments, I'm fairly certain that this is in Godfather 2. Because I did a little bit of looking, and I know that in The Godfather 2, Robert De Niro plays a young or Don Corleone. In sort of flashback scenes, and I believe we do see his rise to power, at least to some extent. I don't know. I haven't seen. I don't know, but I know there are scenes with young Don Corleone. So I'm assuming what we get is some of that. Mm-hmm. So I believe in the second movie we do get that.
Yeah, but again, like we said, this is a 1-to-1 comparison of the first book and the first movie.
Yeah.
There's a scene in the book. Shortly after Michael has to flee to Italy, where the police go pay a visit to Kay Adams and like basically try to like scare her into giving them information, and she completely stonewalls them, and it's fantastic. And then they try to they call her dad in to try to like strong arm her, and he just backs her up. He's like, she gave you your answer. You have your answer. I don't know what you're looking for. And it's kind of a fantastic scene.
Good dad.
There's an analysis of the police in this book that I thought was really good, and I'm just gonna read a little bit of it.
Fantastic.
Hagen understood that the policeman believes in law and order in a curiously innocent way. He believes in it more than does the public he serves. Law and order is, after all, the magic from which he derives his power, individual power, which he cherishes as nearly all men cherish individual power. And yet there is always the smoldering resentment against the public he serves. They are at the same time his ward and his prey. As wards, they are ungrateful, abusive, and demanding. As prey, they are slippery and dangerous, full of guile. As soon as one is in the policeman's clutches, the mechanism of the society the policeman defends marshals all its resources to cheat him of his prize. The fix is put in by politicians. Judges give lenient suspended sentences to the worst hoodlums. Governors of the states and the President of the United States himself give full pardons, assuming that respected lawyers have not already won his acquittal. After a time, the cop learns. Why should he not collect the fees these hoodlums are paying? He needs it more. His children, why should they not go to college? Why shouldn't his wife shop in more expensive places? Why shouldn't he himself get the sun with a winter vacation in Florida? After all, he risks his life, and that is no joke.
It's interesting. There's moments, I think it started, I agreed with it more at the start, and then it turns a little...
I mean, it's specifically about, like, corrupt cops who take bribes.
Right. Well, but it's also...
But the first part of it, I think is really interesting.
Is really interesting and insightful. The second part also leans into a little bit where it seems sympathetic in the sense of, like... and this may be true back in the day for sure, the idea of, like... It leans into the idea of, like, oh... And again, this is sort of the writing from the perspective of what the cops are thinking, but it seems like maybe the author here is a little sympathetic to this idea that politicians and judges and stuff are just like letting criminals off with no punishment, and like and that's that's the thing that sort of turns cops corrupt, is the fact that they're locking up bad guys, and then the crooked judges and the crooked politicians just let them walk free. And And I don't know if that's actually a scathing, like a particularly insightful indictment of what is actually the reason, the problem behind police issues.
No, I agree.
Yeah, I know you agree. I just think that was, to me, what the second half sort of, I was like, I'm with you you had me in the first half, and in the second half I was like, it feels like, but again, that being said, I believe it definitely was more true back then, for sure, because a lot of judges and stuff, especially in cities and whatnot, were in the pocket of organized crime and all that sort of stuff. So they were, in fact, there were criminals that were, just getting out with, a slap on the wrist and that sort of thing. But I'm always hesitant, or not hesitant, but I'm always leery when I hear that sort of rhetoric about criminals getting off with just a slap on the wrist, because to me it's usually I like, those are very easy anecdotes to point at, because it does happen, like somebody gets out, some guy who like did something horrible that should have been in prison for a while, gets out on some weird thing after a few years and then goes on to like murder some people or whatever. And then like, that's a story people point at and be like, this is why, we got to lock up people forever and blah, 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 and tough on crime and all that sort of stuff. So I'm always leery about that sort of rhetoric, because it's like that sort of rhetoric completely ignores the fact that the far more common occurrence is people getting thrown in prison for a very long time for very stupid stuff and for crimes of poverty and that sort of, you know what I mean? And so, but there was, again, the first half of that had some stuff in there about cops seeing, in particular, the line about cops seeing the people that they serve as both their ward and their enemy or whatever.
That's the part that I thought was really more interesting.
Yeah.
Than the other part. I was like, oh, okay, that's like an interesting assessment of the situation.
For sure.
Moving on from that, I'm just gonna go ahead and say this. Apollonia, not as beautiful as described in the book.
How dare you?
Very beautiful woman.
I thought she was strikingly beautiful.
Not as beautiful as described in the book. Her lips were not, what was the description? Rich, but not gross.
I don't know. Her mouth, specifically, it wasn't even her lips. It was her mouth was rich but not gross. But I thought she was incredibly beautiful. I mean, she's not like incredibly beautiful for like 40s. Yeah. She's not like, I don't know. I'm not going to go into my particular proclivities for what I find attractive in women. I thought she was incredibly beautiful, is all I'm going to say. Like, I thought she was very striking, and I thought they did a very good job finding somebody that is like sort of stunningly, like, you see her and you're like, holy cow, just stunningly beautiful. But that's a very much a subjective thing. So
there is in the book something that I really liked was a relationship that developed between Kay and Mama Corleone, which we're totally missing in the movie. We're actually missing, but Mama Corleone has a lot of like really good moments in the book. Like I said a couple times in my notes, I had like, can we just make this book about her?
That would actually be really fascinating.
I would find that extremely fascinating because she was like a very interesting woman.
That's what we need. What we don't need is the 5th version of Twilight from a different perspective or gender bent. What we need is the Godfather from the perspective of Mama Corleone. Why don't we get that?
Yes. Give it to me. But yeah, her and Kay have ended up having like a really nice relationship that I enjoyed.
Yeah, we see her in the movie a couple times, but she never has a line that is like, at least I don't think, that is like to a character on, like, she only ever talks in scenes where she's like part of a group of people. Yeah. Like the main scene I remember from is the singing scene, like with the because I think that's her.
Yeah, they pull her up to sing.
They pull her up to sing, and then she pulls like her dad maybe or something up on to sing, and like she's saying some stuff then, but like she never like has a conversation with somebody on camera like in the whole movie.
So this is a random thing that I just thought was really funny in this book, which is the Corleone's derision of the Chicago mafia scene. A couple lines in particular. that he held the Capones in small esteem as stupid, obvious cutthroats.
Got him.
And then later on,
Suck it, Al.
when they have the meeting of all the Dons, and it's like all the Dons from everywhere.
Yeah, because
It's
they
not
say
just,
like West Coast and everything.
West
yeah.
Coast and East Coast, and it's all the Dons except Chicago.
They didn't invite him to the Don party
because they had given up trying to civilize Chicago. And I was like, suck it, Chicago.
Oh, God.
Stupid, obvious cutthroats.
The Midwest gets no respect, even in organized crime. It's one of the biggest cities in the world. It's still... Ugh. Fine. I like Chicago.
Another line that I really loved when Don Corleone and the leader of the Tattaglia family, like, quote unquote, make peace.
They hug.
And they hug. And the book reads, they would not send each other Christmas gifts, but they would not murder each other. Which I guess is the best you can hope for.
That's my relationship with 99.9% of people on Earth. So...
So one thing that the movie does not go into is how they're able to bring Michael home from Italy, which was really
like the logistics of
like
getting
the
him off for the crime.
logistics of how they got him off for that crime. And it's real bleak. Hold on to your hat.
Okay.
So there's this other family, the Boccicchios. I had the audiobook for this. Loved the way the guy pronounced Boccicchio. It was very adorable.
Boccicchio.
And there's a member of the Boccicchio family, Felix, who was kind of like separated. Like he wasn't really involved in the like organized crime aspect of it, but he was a lawyer and he kind of got tricked into committing a little fraud. a little bit of fraud.
Have a little fraud as a treat.
He apparently was not a very good lawyer. But he
so you're Rudy Giuliani type.
yeah. Because the Boccicchios are all stupid. He was the smartest one.
So you're Rudy Giuliani type.
He was the smartest one, but he was apparently still pretty stupid. Yeah. So he gets tricked into committing fraud, and then the other guys, because they're smarter than him, like he takes the fall for all of it and goes to prison. And then he gets out of prison and immediately goes and murders everyone who framed him and sent him to prison. And it ends up like blowing up into this whole big thing, and like everybody is like shouting for his head, and so they're going to, like, he gets the death penalty. Like, he's going to be killed. So the Corleones are like, you know, you're going to be killed anyway. You might as well confess to the crime of murdering Sollozzo and McCluskey so we can bring Michael home.
There you go.
And somehow that works.
I think it's maybe a good idea to skip over that. Like that might have been a little complicated for the, like a little bit like a little convoluted for the purpose of the film. We already had a 3-hour movie. Like maybe.
But it's interesting.
It is interesting. I won't disagree there.
Also, the movie robbed us of getting to hear Boccicchio all the time.
True.
I thoroughly enjoyed the chapters about the Boccicchios because I got to hear the guys say it over and over. Mm-hmm. Okay, so most of the Johnny Fontaine stuff is cut out of this movie, which is fine. I'll talk more about that later. But one thing that I did miss, there was a character called Nino, who was a friend of Johnny Fontaine, like an old friend, and he also sings. And like Johnny Fontaine ends up like bringing him out to Vegas and like helping him become a big star, blah, blah, blah. But Nino is an alcoholic, real bad alcoholic. And the progression
By standards of that era, that means something.
real bad.
Because everybody's drinking all the time.
he drinks himself to death, like, on purpose. But the progression of his alcoholism throughout the novel is so deftly done. It's so subtle and good. Chef's kiss.
Okay.
There's also a doctor character in that storyline who's not in the movie, who he was a surgeon, and then he starts doing abortions, so they, like, take his license. Because, you know, it's illegal.
Right, yeah, it's 1940s.
Yeah, and so the Corleones basically are like, oh, you can go work as the doctor in our hotels.
Yeah.
But he talks about why he likes doing abortions. And he's talking about how, like, when he tells people, like, when he gives people advice, like medical advice, they ignore him. Because, like, he tells Nino and Johnny, like, he can't drink anymore. He's gonna die.
Yeah.
And he says, I started to do abortions. Nice and easy, everybody happy, like washing the dishes and leaving a clean sink. That was my class. I loved it. I loved being an abortionist. I don't believe that a 2-month fetus is a human being, so no problems there. I was helping young girls and married women who were in trouble. I was making good money. I was out on the front lines. When I got caught, I felt like a deserter that had been hauled in. But I thought it was really interesting, this kind of distinction of, like, this is something that I'm doing and I feel really good about what I'm doing.
Yeah,
like,
because the people you're doing it for want to do it.
They want to do it.
And they're happier when you do, like, afterwards. And like he said, he's like, it's a fucking fetus. It's not a person. Like, this is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not like his character particularly other than that.
Right, yeah.
Which I will talk more about later. I have a lot of thoughts on that. But that's all the stuff I thought was better in the book.
All right, let's go ahead and find out what you thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
Okay, so I thought that it made sense to open with Amerigo pleading to the Don. The book opens, like, with giving the backstory of all the different characters who come to ask him for favors on Connie's wedding day. And I thought the contrast with how easily the others were able to get favors from him, like, contrasted then with Amerigo, was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, what they're doing there is establishing, you get a lot about Don's Corleone's character there because, I mean, there's the explicit line where somebody says, and I'm sure it's from the book, a Sicilian father can never...
Yeah, you cannot refuse a request
on your daughter's wedding day or something like that. And so the fact that he is giving Amerigo any sort of pushback here is very indicative of his character and the fact that he feels disrespected by Amerigo and that Amerigo has not kept up the relationship that the Don expects from his friends. And it very quickly establishes that everything about how Don Corleone operates is about respect. Like, I mean, yeah, and that sort of thing.
There's a cat in this movie.
Yes, adorable cat.
Adorable cat.
Who seemed very delighted to be in Marlon Brando's lap.
Seemed super happy and chill about it. There's not a cat in the book, so that's better. Mm-hmm. It's always better with a cat. So we see in the movie Sonny having sex with one of the bridesmaids. Yeah. That's Lucy Mancini. Mm. And this book contains the worst.
Is this the thing?
No, that's later.
Oh my God. Okay, because there was a moment, and just to clarify for people, there was a moment where Katie went, "Oh God, that's the worst thing I've ever read," or something like that. Uh-huh. And I was like, "Oh, okay." So now I was thinking it was this, but it's not this.
No. That other thing we'll get to later, I had a visceral reaction to that.
I've never seen you react like that to reading something.
But this is the worst sex scene I've ever read in my life. And it's very gross. And just for like context for people who don't know me, I don't usually find sex scenes gross.
And this isn't, and just to clarify, it's not like assault or anything.
No,
like it's consensual.
No, it's consensual. Okay. You're very hard pressed to write something that's gonna gross me out.
Yeah,
is my point. This took the cake. Go ahead and skip ahead a little bit.
Oh boy,
if you don't want to hear this.
So excited.
Now, as she ran up the steps towards Sunny, a tremendous flash of desire went through her body. On the landing, Sunny grabbed her hand and pulled her down the hall into an empty bedroom. Her legs went weak as the door closed behind them. She felt Sunny's mouth on hers, her lips tasting of burnt tobacco, bitter. She opened her mouth. At that moment, she felt his hand come up beneath her bridesmaid's gown, heard the rustle of material giving way, felt his large, warm hand between her legs, ripping aside the satin panties to caress her vulva. She put
Never use the word vulva in a sex scene. Tip 1.
She put her arms around his neck and hung there as he opened his trousers. Then he placed
Trousers, another terrible word.
Then he placed both hands beneath her bare buttocks and lifted
Buttocks. Why is every word choice the worst word choice?
her. She gave a little hop in the air so that both her legs were wrapped around his upper thighs. His tongue was in her mouth and she sucked on it.
What? You know what's funny is that, see, if you saw this, it would probably just be hot. Like what is happening is not like what you said. It's not like a weirdly like they're just making out and having like it's not. But the way it's written is upsetting.
Babe, I have not even gotten started.
God, okay.
He gave a savage thrust that banged her head against the door. She felt something burning pass between her thighs. She let her right hand drop from his neck and reached down to guide him. Her hand closed around an enormous, blood-engorged pole of muscle.
Oh my God! What? What? No! Sir!
Okay,
Mario Puzo!
I can get through this. Let me get through it.
Sir! Pole of muscle?
Okay. It pulsated in her hand like an animal. And almost weeping with grateful ecstasy, she pointed it into her own wet, turgid flesh.
No! Oh, God! Turgid? Why would you use the word turgid?
Okay, the thrust of its entering, the unbelievable pleasure made her gasp, brought her legs up almost around his neck, and then I lost my
Painting a very vivid picture.
Please.
Oh, God.
And then, like a quiver, her body received the savage arrows.
No! Why is every sentence worse than the last sentence? How is it so continuously worse?
Okay.
Oh my God, I can't breathe. Oh God.
Her body received the savage arrows of his lightning-like thrust.
Jesus Christ!
Innumerable torturing, arching her pelvis higher and higher until for the first time in her life she reached a shattering climax. felt his hardness break.
Oh my god! Break?
And then
That's not good!
then the crawly flood of semen.
Wait, what? No! The what? Hold on. Read that sentence again.
Hang on, I can't.
God.
Okay. Felt his hardness break, and then the crawly flood of semen over her thighs.
Crawley? Crawly?
Yes.
It would be bad if it was crawling, but Crawley is so weird. God.
Anyway, that belongs.
Was Mario Puzo an incel? What the fuck was that?
I don't believe this man ever had sex.
God, what was that?
Oh,
Holy shit.
yeah. It's a lot going on there. There's a lot going on.
God, you could not have possibly prepared me for that. That is the hardest I've laughed in a decade. Easily. Oh my god. Holy shit.
Okay, now I want you to remember that the other thing that is not even what I had a visceral audible reaction to
how
as
is
I
it
was
not?
reading.
Oh my god.
It's simply the worst thing I've ever read.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad we were able to have a moment of levity there, because I'm about to go over some bleak details.
Great.
I liked the detail of Tom like sweeping the kids away from Luca Brasi when he goes in to talk to the Godfather, because in the book we get Luca Brasi's backstory.
Oh.
And his backstory is that he got a girl pregnant and then had the baby thrown in a furnace.
Oh.
I'm okay with leaving that out.
It is interesting because we see so little of him in the film, but it's mentioned and implied that he's like a ruthless murderer, but he seems kind of like a big dumb lovable oaf in the movie.
Yeah, he does.
He comes across like an Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
But everything we hear about him, which is not a ton, but a little bit, is that he's like a ruthless, terrifying, like psychopathic murderer.
Yes.
We don't ever see any of that really.
But he is.
Yeah.
There's also a moment when Tom Hagen is at Jack Woltz's house, the Hollywood guy, horsehead in the bed guy. And we see in the movie like a little blonde girl who's like an actress or whatever, presumably. But there's follow-up with her in the book. Tom Hagen sees her and her mother, who's like implied as like the stage mother type, leaving Jack Woltz's house, and very clearly had sex with this girl.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Who is supposed to be like very young.
A child.
Yeah,
yes.
a child. So again, I was okay with not having that.
Yeah.
I was fine with it. When Don Corleone gets shot, I thought having Fredo like fumble with his gun and like not.
Oh, is
like,
that? I almost asked about that because I thought that was a fun little detail.
I don't think that was in the book. I don't remember reading it. But yeah, I thought that was a nice touch, especially because Fredo's supposed to be like a fuck up.
Fredo, the perpetual failson.
Yeah.
Yeah. He comes out. He like drops his gun. Yeah.
I really liked the moment when Michael is arriving at the hospital, because it's not just unguarded. It seems to have been like abandoned initially
like
in the
there's
movie.
nobody around.
And it's like it's super creepy
Very
and like
creepy.
the record is like repeating
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's like a half-eaten sandwich. It's like a zombie movie moment.
You know, it's funny you say that, is that what it reminded me of, which I double check the years. Give me 2 seconds. Oh, it would have been after. It reminded me of, because when Michael walks up, he walks up through the gate of the hospital, is like this big arching gate. And you say, you know, it kind of reminded you of like a horror movie. It reminded me of The Exorcist. When the priest walks up, the poster for The Exorcist,
Yeah.
you know, where the shot
with
of
like
the light.
single light.
Coming. It's like that. And it reminded me so much of it. I was like, wait, was this the same cinematographer? And it's not. I went and looked that up. And The Exorcist came out the year after this movie. So it's possible that they took inspiration from this movie, but it's not. I was thinking like maybe The Exorcist came out like, you know, right before this, and they were like going for that kind of like a horror movie, like the most popular horror movie feel of the time. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
We get McCluskey's backstory in the book. It's not particularly interesting. I was fine with skipping it. I don't need to know about that guy. I liked in the restaurant though, where they're just like sitting awkwardly waiting for the waiter to pop the wine cork and pour their wine.
Yeah.
It's like this little pocket of modern sitcom humor in the middle of
He just
this
like keeps
movie.
looking over, and he's just like,
Just like fussing with it.
yeah.
I also really liked the moment in the bathroom after Michael gets the gun where he like collects himself
I had a note
before
about
walking back out.
I had a note about this. That shot over the door of the bathroom, and it's just the back of Michael's head after he gets the gun, and he's like running his hands through his hair and like you said, collecting himself, and then you hear the train.
Yeah.
And the train kind of drowns out everything, and just everything about that shot that's one of those moments, and there's quite a few of them in this movie. And I'm sure people get this for different things, and I get this with movies or TV. I get it with TV shows too, but you know, it's funny. As much as I like TV shows, I don't get this feeling as much with TV shows as I feel like I do with movies. But that was one of those moments that gave me those like full body chills of like, this is art. Like,
yeah.
This is what, if I could craft one moment of anything I make in my life, like this 6 seconds of this movie. I would have succeeded. You know what I mean? Like, it's like that of just like the way the framing of the shot, and it's not even like the most crazy thing in the world. It's just like the framing, the sound, everything about it is just so concentrated. Like, I don't even know. It's it was so good. I loved that moment.
I liked setting up some tension between Sonny and Carlo at the dinner table. There's the scene where they're all at the dinner table, and Sonny's like talking business, and somebody else is like, "Oh, we don't talk business at the dinner table."
Sonny's talking racist business.
Yes, and then like Carlo tries to like join in and be like buddy buddy, and then Sonny's like, "We don't talk business at the dinner table."
Yeah.
Not having it.
Yeah.
And now we've arrived at the line that I had that reaction to.
Oh
as I was
God,
reading.
I forgot. The last moment emptied it from my brain, and now I don't know if I'm prepared for this.
It's basically just one single line.
Yeah, right.
But it is quite literally the worst thing I've ever read. And I say that now, you having heard the last worst thing that I'd ever read.
I can't even.
This is really gross. This is your warning.
Skip ahead 30 seconds.
He had never slept with any girl unless there was something about her he really liked. Except, of course, sometimes when he was very drunk and found himself in bed with a girl he didn't even remember meeting or seeing before. And now that he was 35 years old, divorced once, estranged from his second wife, with maybe 1,000 pubic scalps dangling from his belt.
Fucking Christ.
That's the worst thing I've ever read. Why did this book subject me to that?
That's real bad. That's real bad.
Real bad.
Real bad.
Real bad. Speaking of
Real bad.
speaking of real bad, though, another plot point that I was fine with skipping. I mentioned the doctor earlier, the abortionist. So he's out in Vegas, and he gets together with Lucy Mancini, who was Sonny's mistress, and
Yeah, the from the beginning.
yes,
From the sex scene.
and she loved his.
The one with the turgid flesh.
she loved his pole of muscle.
Good Christ.
But she gets together with this doctor, and she's like embarrassed to have sex with him, and he diagnoses her, and it turns out that she has an oversized vagina.
What?
Her vagina is too big.
What does that even mean?
I tried to look this up, and what I found, and please don't come for me if you're a medical professional, because I was working on very, very little information here that was like buried under 5 layers of sexism and
this
also,
is very much like a 1940s
like
doctor
like
diagnosis,
1940s.
yeah.
But apparently, like, you can have a condition that where like the muscles aren't like connected properly.
Okay, I mean, sure, it seems feasible.
And it can have like detrimental effects to your health, and you can get it surgically corrected.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if that's what's supposed to be happening here precisely.
I feel like you would not categorize that as oversized or large, but so much as maybe loose or like something would be the descriptors.
Loose vagina is what
not
I
that that's
found.
better, but like it at least seems like it would more accurately describe what is happening. I don't even know.
But there's a lot going on with this. Lot of really gross lines. He calls in another surgeon friend to fix this for her. We get lines such as, "He's gonna put in some real tight walls." No. And then we have a play-by-play of the surgery.
That's so.
And the surgeon like describes what he's doing, and I was like, why? Why this?
Yeah, that's something. 'Cause it. Yeah, I don't.
I mean,
don't
and
know.
I guess she ends up happy, so I guess
Well, that's good.
good.
I mean, if it's a real thing, and if it's a condition, and if it's something that is, like you said, it could be detrimental, then I don't know. It feels like there's a lot of weird baggage within the context of this book. It feels like this book is not the place to explore that concept and what it means to a person with a vagina to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
This is not where we do that.
Yeah.
I guess is like what I feel like there's like, assuming it's a real thing. I have no idea. Assuming it's a real thing and it's something that, is a condition that people deal with, it could be something interesting to hear a perspective about and somebody dealing with that. But the Mario Puzo is not the motherfucker to write that, I guess, would be my point.
Well, too bad, because he did. God. I liked the movie's choice to show Kay trying to get a letter to Michael like immediately after he marries Apollonia in Italy.
Oh God, yeah. It reminded me of the first Thanksgiving we had together.
Wait, what?
Wait, what? Yeah. Didn't you just say Michael has to meet all of Apollonia's extended family?
Yes. Yeah, no, I skipped that bullet point. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Yeah, he has. I liked that too.
Yeah, I thought that's what you said. I guess my brain just read that and thought that was what you said.
No, I just accidentally skipped that bullet point. Yeah, he because they invite him to the house.
And he shakes hands with every single, and there's like 8,000 people. And I was like I said, it reminded me of our first Thanksgiving together when I met all of your family.
Yeah. Because I have a lot of family.
Yeah.
But in the book, it's just it's like her parents, and she has like a couple brothers.
Yeah.
But then in the movie, like all her cousins and everything,
there's
guess
like
are
84
there.
people
There's
in
like,
the square, like the palazzo of their estate or whatever. Yeah.
But then right after they get married, we see Kay desperately trying to get a letter to him, like trying to contact him.
Interesting.
And she does in the book hand off a letter to Mama Corleone, but it happens like much earlier. I think it happens before we see any of Michael in Italy. So I liked moving that around. I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And my last note here, I was totally fine with skipping over Al Neri's backstory. Al Neri is the new Luca Brasi.
I think we also
like briefly meet him.
I think we get more of that maybe later on because he becomes more important subsequently because he takes over Luca Brasi's position.
He used to be a cop. That's all we really need to know about him.
Cool. All right, we got a handful of things to talk about in the movie. Nailed it.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
Okay, we're gonna run through these. No Sicilian can refuse a request on his daughter's wedding day.
Yeah, we talked about that.
I don't know if that's a real thing, but maybe it is. I don't know.
Yeah. And just to get to it, and you may talk about this more later, but before we get into specific stuff, because I did ask you at one point, like halfway through the movie, like how close is this? Overall, it seems like the movie is
pretty
very
close,
very
yes.
close,
Pretty
and
close.
does nail a lot from the book. But you're getting
Right.
those specifics, obviously.
As always, I not every single detail. This is not an exhaustive list.
No. Yeah, not an exhaustive list at all. And that's why I was kind of clarifying that a lot about
the movie is accurate to the book. Tom Hagen's backstory, that he was adopted by the Corleones after he was wandering in the street. Johnny Fontaine serenades at the wedding. That happened.
And all the girls go crazy.
Yeah, that happened in the book, and I was like, oh, great, he's singing.
Did you have to read him singing?
No, he just sings.
Okay.
It wasn't like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if they had like, the little indent and the
lyrics.
Yeah, the lyrics.
Tom's interactions with Jack Woltz, pretty similar. It's a little bit shortened and glossed over, but pretty similar.
That's the producer, right?
Yes. Sonny does show his ass after the Don says no to Salozzo, which is what kicks off everything.
Yeah.
Sonny not being able to keep his mouth shut.
Yep.
Luca Brasi does get garroted to death. Garroted?
Garroted. Probably.
Garroted.
I think. You know what I didn't realize until I was like doing some reading afterwards is that the guy who stabs his hand is Brazzini's son.
Yeah.
I thought he was just like the bartender. I thought he was like I thought he was like Brazzini's like enforcer, like who was like the bartender or something. And it's his son. I had no idea.
No, it's Tatalia.
Or sorry,
yeah,
or Tatalia or
Bruno
something.
Tatalia.
Who ends up, he gets killed later.
Yeah, he does.
That's the guy they kill. When they say, which we don't see in the movie, when they kill, after they try to kill Don Corleone.
Yeah.
Sonny
kills.
Arranges a hit
Bruno.
on, and it's that guy. I didn't realize it was that guy.
Rocco Lampone. I love his name so much. He kills Polly while Clemenza pees in the grass.
Rocco stolen by what's his name when he made fucking Boondock Saints. Also, the scene in so much of Boondock Saints, I'm now realizing too, is just a bad version of The Godfather.
I've never seen that, so
bad.
I cannot weigh in.
Anyways.
Clemenza has a line when he's helping Michael practice with the gun, where he's like, "Oh, you got to stop people. You got to stop it right away. You got to stop people right away. Like they should have stopped Hitler at Munich."
Yeah, that line was. Yeah, I thought that was kind of funny.
The fake out, like they're gonna go to Jersey, and then like the driver swings the car around on the bridge and goes back into the city.
Yeah, and Michael's like freaking out. He's like, "Wait a second, where are we going?"
I did not know.
I thought that was particularly fun because it's a fun little moment for us as the viewer, knowing that Michael knows where they're going and is freaking out, but then they pull a Yui, and then that moment of them being like, "Nice, we lost him. We're in the clear," and we're like, "Oh shit!" Like as an audience, I thought was a great that double moment of, sort of dramatic irony almost. Yeah.
Yeah. He does shoot McCluskey in the throat before shooting him in the head. Not on purpose, I don't think. I don't think that was on purpose, but I thought that was a nice detail to bring over.
Yeah.
That when Michael falls in love with Apollonia, they do call it the Thunderbolt. They say he got hit by the Thunderbolt.
Yep.
She stumbles on the path on purpose to like fall into him.
Oh, I
When they're
missed
having
that. Did
their
that happen in the
courtship.
movie?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I noticed it because I was looking for
Right,
it.
I missed it. Because it was part of like the montage, probably.
Yeah, I was like, haha, she stumbled. Sonny beats the ever-living snot out of Carlo outside of his place of work.
I did want to talk about that moment in the movie because there's in one particular moment where he throws a punch and it's so clearly like it's so clearly.
I didn't notice.
Oh, there's one. I mean, overall it looks okay, but there's in particular one punch he throws that because obviously he's not hitting him, you know, and they do it all from one take from the side, which I think is an interesting choice. And they must have rehearsed it enough that they thought it would look good, and it looks okay mostly. But there is one moment where Sonny throws a punch and he misses his face by like 6 inches, and you can see it by a mile. And it was probably their best take apart from that moment, so they used it. But yeah, it's like, oh yeah, yeah.
The big meeting of all the Dons was pretty spot on, again, if shortened. In the book, we get kind of a semi-extended history for all these different families. We like learn a little bit about a lot of them. And I did kind of miss some of the catty commentary.
Yeah.
But it's fine. It wouldn't translate to film, so it's fine.
Yeah.
Fredo does go full Vegas.
Oh yeah.
In the book.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. The slicked back hair and his sweet glasses.
If he becomes a womanizer. And Carlo's death was very spot on.
Like kicking through the windshield?
Yeah, like where they get him in the car. And
Interesting.
He poops himself, which is not in the movie.
No. Well, not that we know
Not
of.
that we see anyway.
That is a pretty common story to go along with dying. All right, we got a handful of odds and ends before we get to the final verdict. This movie, again, this being my first time watching it, I mean, I knew this movie was, it being 3 hours long, and, you know, it being the kind of movie that I knew it was. I knew it was going to be a slow burn, but boy, it is the slowest of burns. Like, we spend the first 30 minutes of this movie at a wedding, and then we watch a lawyer fly to LA to intimidate a movie producer. And, like, the only thing exciting that happened... I don't want to say exciting, because it's all very riveting. But in terms of, like, even the remotest bit of, like, excitement is the horse head. Like, that's the first thing that's, like, a thing. You know what I mean? That's, like, anything bordering on, like, spectacle in the film. But that being said, the first... all the stuff before that, everything in Don Corleone's office is riveting, fantastic stuff. But it's just, I was almost, I was expecting it to be a slow burn, and I was still surprised by how much of a slow burn it was.
Speaking of being at the wedding, I just want to note that I would have been absolutely mortified if I were Kay and Michael pulled me into the family photo at the wedding. This
is the first time she's met any of them.
Yeah, no. Like, it's one thing if you've been together for a long time, or like you're engaged, or, you know, whatnot. This is the first time she's ever met them.
And it's another thing if it's not a wedding. If it's, we're taking a family photo, it's, you know, Thanksgiving, maybe, or whatever, or, you know, we're having a family picnic or something, and we're taking a picture. But a wedding photo. The wedding photo.
No.
No, thank you. Nope, not at all.
So I was fully not expecting the writing style of this book.
Well, I mean, I've got a little bit of a taste of it. It caught me very
off guard. I wouldn't exactly call the prose purple, but it's at least pale lavender.
I'd call it turgid, is what I would call it.
It's kind of flowery almost. It's very interesting.
I mean, that sex scene that you read would not be remotely out of place in the most ridiculous of romance novels.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to me, that was like you were reading a pen, you know,
like an old fashioned bodice ripper from the 80s.
Yeah, like absolutely.
The turgid flesh.
Yeah, it is absolutely like a bodice, 100%. So yeah, it doesn't. If the rest of the writing follows suit, I get it. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that in this film, and I don't know, I kind of wanted to see if was that in the movie necessarily. I just wanted to talk about it and see if people who know more about this movie than I do, and more about like the discussion and analysis and stuff of this film than I do, this movie cars seem to be tied to death a lot in this movie. Not exclusively, like people don't only die in or around cars in this movie, but they do a lot.
Yeah.
We see Paulie is shot in the car. Paulie Gatto is shot in the car and dies. Don Corleone, when he's the attempt on his life, he falls into the car, like he's near, like
he falls on it.
Falls on the car, and the guys hop out of the car when they, or actually I think they might just run up. I can't remember, but and then Sonny obviously is in his car, and then at the end. Carlo,
and Apollonia too.
And Apollonia, yeah. So like there's like 5 deaths that all take place in or specifically adjacent to cars. And I thought that was really interesting. And I was wondering, because to me, what I thought that could be, and it doesn't always necessarily tie in directly to the characters, but to me, because one of the things that is such a through line of this story is the death of the old ways and the bringing in of the new ways. Now, this takes place in the 40s, where cars have been around for a while. This isn't but it is around the time when cars were like everybody started having cars. I think was in like the 20s to 40. Like it's only been a decade or two since like lots of people had cars. And maybe even less. I don't know when like lots of people started getting cars, but I don't think it was much earlier than like the 20s or 30s or something like that. I could be wrong. And so to me, I almost wondered, and I mean, honestly, obviously with like Don Corleone, he's sort of represents the old ways, him falling on the car, and the new, like, so I guess my point and sort of my thesis here, my thing that I would write my paper about in film school if I were doing this would be something about how cars sort of represent the new age, and thus the people dying in cars or near cars is sort of the cars are sort of ushering in that new era, and they are sort of the harbinger of death for the old way. You see what I mean? Does that make sense at all? I don't know. I don't know if there's anything there. And again, it doesn't always track perfectly, because like, so Don Corleone, I think, sort of represents obviously the old way. Apollonia, obviously, with the old country, she's like very much like the epitome of like
the old ways.
Yeah. Sonny is like sort of kind of, he's like a hybrid-y type of character between the old and the new ways, but he's much more the new way, so it doesn't really track necessarily. And then Carlo is definitely, Carlo's like a fucking weird, so I don't know if it necessarily, I just thought it was interesting that so much of the death that happens in this movie happens near cars or in cars.
Yeah, no, that is interesting, and I don't know if there's symbolism there that I'm not aware of. Regarding cars, I don't know a lot about the symbolism of cars.
No, I like, to me, like I said, I think the only thing that really even remotely makes sense or tracks is what I said, like like cars representing progress.
Yeah.
And thus harbingers of death to the old way. I don't know.
Well, I think you could view the people who are killed in cars or injured around cars, in the case of Don Corleone, as people who are trying to maintain the old ways, like trying to maintain the status quo rather than like allowing Michael to ascend.
Yeah, I guess a little bit. I mean, it falls apart a little. I don't know, because like Sonny is not like Sonny. Like the whole reason he dies and the whole reason shit pops off is because he's pushing for like he wants to, right? Unless I'm misremembering, like Don
Right.
Corleone's like, I don't want to deal with the drugs and shit, and Sonny's like, no, we should get into this, and like
Right.
he's trying to, and so like him pushing for I don't know, like he's not really necessarily trying to maintain like the status quo in that regard. So I don't know if it works. I just wanted to put it out there and see if anybody else is smarter than me was like had thought of this or if it was a thing that I was unaware of, like the cars and death and the God. I don't know. I literally Googled cars and death in The Godfather and was trying to see, and I didn't see anything. So I was like, okay. And all I found was like, here's the car that was in The Godfather. I was like, it's not what okay, fine, whatever. But if anybody else has thought about this or has seen anything or read anything about it, I would be interested to hear more. So
We mentioned in the prequel that the actor who played Johnny Fontaine used like some mafia strong arming
yes,
to get
his
part,
role, yeah.
and then subsequently got mafia strong armed
Out of the movie?
into a reduced role.
Yeah.
And I was like, after watching this movie, I was like, boy, howdy, did he ever get written out of this story? Because he is in so much more of the book.
Yeah.
So much more.
Yeah, he's in 2 scenes in the movie,
Yeah.
I think. Like, literally, like 2, maybe 3 scenes tops. But yeah, barely in the movie. And yeah, it's interesting. Having now finally seen The Godfather, I have to say, and this is for some GB or BB fans out there, Alex Maisonette films make so much more sense to me now. Like, I just not even just him, but every bad crime / mob movie I've ever seen makes so much more sense now. Having seen The Godfather, they're all trying to be Francis Ford Coppola, and spoilers, none of them are. Like, so
You know what would improve The Godfather, though?
what?
News today.
News today. If Lenny G had
Lenny
showed
G
up, if
had
Lenny G
just
had showed
walked
up,
into that crime scene.
Lenny G here. News today.
Can you make that happen? Can you Photoshop
I can try. I can
that?
figure out something. I'll figure out something.
Make that happen for me.
Yeah. But yeah, it is. But what you do, what is, and the moment it was very striking to me, where I was like, oh, okay. Like specifically Alex Maisonette films, like I was like, oh my god, is. And if you're not a GB or BB fan, it's Good, Bad, or Bad. It's my YouTube channel. If you're just, which not a ton of people, but there are people who don't. I have a YouTube channel called Good, Bad, or Bad, where we watch like terrible movies and talk about them, kind of like, Red Letter Media, whatever. Take your pick of like bad movie podcasts or YouTube channels. And one of the series of movies we've done is by a director named Alex Maisonette, who used to be a cop, and then he started writing like crime movies. And they're just terrible. They're just the worst. But they're hilarious. And it's very clear to me now that he's a big fan of the Godfather movies and probably Scarface and other stuff, because I've also not seen Scarface. But one of the things that he does in his movies all the time is these like newspaper shots.
Yeah.
It's like you see newspaper headlines and pictures and stuff. And I mean, other movies do that, but it's very clear to me in this movie, there's this moment after
It's after Michael kills Soloso
the
and
big
McCluskey.
crackdown on organized
Yeah.
crime, and we're seeing all these headlines from newspapers and pictures and stuff. And I was like, oh, this is right out of an Alex Maisonette film. But it's so funny because in this movie, obviously, they look like real newspapers and they're like real. They look like real pictures from crime scenes and like stuff. Whereas in Alex Maisonette films, he literally just pulls stills from earlier in the movie, like the actual footage they shot of, like, somebody being murdered. He takes a picture from a still frame from the film that they shot of the person being murdered, and then puts that on the front page of the newspaper. And it makes no sense. And the headlines are crazy, and they're like. They just, nobody would write, like, everything about it's nuts, but it is the same idea.
Yeah.
And he also does the same kind of thing with like, and another thing that this movie does that like all kinds of directors think they can do, but just can't because they're not as efficient and competent at storytelling as this film is the time jumps without any explanation. That kind of editing is like a thing that I think bad directors think they can do. But you can't unless you know what you're doing. And also you can't because your performances aren't good enough, your characterizations aren't good enough. Like, it shouldn't work. This movie, the way it's edited, shouldn't work, and the way the story is structured shouldn't work. But it only does because the characterizations are so strong and the performances are so good that in the very like sort of punctuated situations and moments that we get in these characters' lives are so powerful and effective that you can just like show a brief moment of a scene and then jump forward a handful of weeks with zero explanation, and I'm still on board and I'm not confused, and it's just, it works. But if you don't have Al Pacino and a master level script and the best cinematography, that's some of the best cinematography that's ever been put to film, you can't do that. And everybody thinks they can, myself included. I did that, stuff like not this, but stuff like that when I was making short films in college and stuff. But yeah, it's just it was very striking to me how influential this film is on bad filmmakers.
Well, and I think too, where a lot of artists who aren't as good or are like more amateur fall down is that they think they can just jump right to doing stuff like that. And when the reality of the situation is that you have to learn rules before you can effectively break rules.
That's it. Yeah, that's exactly it. Is that it's, you see this and you go, I can do that. This is amazing. I want to do this. And it's but this is not the first movie that Francis Ford Coppola put together, and not just him alone, because
a whole team of people,
all of which working together. This is not their first rodeo, or even their second or third rodeo. Like,
and I think that is like a misconception about a lot of art. And creative endeavors is that, you just have to be talented. Well, no, like it doesn't hurt.
No, that's very
talented,
good. Yeah,
but you also have to hone your craft.
Yeah, and it is there are people, it happens occasionally, where somebody shows up and the first movie they write, direct, whatever, is like brilliant. Yeah, it happens, but it's crazy rare. Most people do a bunch of stuff and suck at it, or at least are mediocre at it for a very long time before they make anything good. And it is very clear that people, watch this movie and go, this is brilliant, because it is brilliant, and then they're like, let's do that. And it's the same thing. Like one of the short films, the main short film I did in college was like a Memento ripoff, basically. And it's like, well, spoiler, I'm not Christopher Nolan. Like that's, like it's not the case. So yeah. I will say I also get why weird like return to tradition chuds love this movie.
Yeah.
Like those weird internet nerds and like incels and alt-righty weirdos.
Guys who also misinterpret Fight Club.
Yes, guys who misinterpret Fight Club and Joker and all that sort of stuff. This movie is just severe men standing around in smoky rooms, all dressed really cool, and then it's all shot like an oil painting, so they look fucking incredible. It just everything looks as cool as can be because it looks like one of the hate myself that I blanked on every old master that would be relevant for this. Doesn't matter. But yeah, it looks like a Renaissance oil painting, and it's just it makes sense. I get why chuds like this. Also, they get to be racist, and it's fun. Like there's a couple scenes where like our heroes are like funnily racist. Like I say fun, like like they're like the one scene in particular where Sonny is being like kind of shittily. I don't even remember. It's like saying something
where he's
about
talking about like
black people in
the
Detroit,
guys in Harlem
having like Cadillacs and stuff, and he's it's just being like racist, but it's played kind of as a joke. There's no commentary on it. The only black people in this movie are servants. Yeah, literally this. And to be fair, I mean, it's a period piece about the Italian mafia. I'm not expecting a bunch of black people. I'm just saying, like, it is like the epitome of what dumb internet chuds think culture is. And so, but it's so funny that being said, you would have to completely miss the point of this movie to think that this is aspirational.
Yeah.
This film is so clearly a tragedy. It's so clearly a tragedy. It's so clearly a fucking tragedy. Like, I got to the end of this and I Googled, I was like, The Godfather is a tragedy. And there was like 8,000 articles. I was like, okay, thank God. I was like, this is, I mean, it's literally just about the downfall, like the horrifying, sad, fucking descent of Michael Corleone. Like, that's
like,
all this is.
The way he gets suckered into that world despite starting out not wanting anything
to be that.
to
Yes.
do with it.
And just wanting, and it's just about how
Yeah.
it ruins his life and turns him into the monster he never wanted to be. You know, and that being said, I think there's also some interesting little tidbits about like the fact that he was already kind of that monster because the war turned him into that. Because like if you go to war, like in particular, I want to mention this: the scene in the restaurant when I'm so glad I was worried I was going to forget to mention this, when he kills Sollozzo and the captain, the moment as he's sitting there at the table after he gets the gun. And he's sitting there and he's just like dead-eyed, 1,000-yard stare. And then the train comes by and the sound of the train just keeps getting louder and louder.
Mm-hmm.
To me, he like goes into like PTSD, like to me, that's like cinema signifier for like, he's like, you know, like,
he goes into a state.
Yeah. He like falls back into like Trent, you know, and it was World War II, but you know, like, his brain just like reverts into like war mode. And like that sound, the amplification of the train sound is sort of classic PTSD type signifier thing. And so I thought that was really interesting that I think, and based on Francis Ford Coppola's other works, he's no big fan of war, I think. If I have not seen Apocalypse Now. This is the first Francis Ford Coppola movie I've ever seen, just to be clear. Anyways, but from what I know of Apocalypse Now, not a big fan of war. And so I thought it was really interesting that he worked a little bit of that in here.
Yeah.
And I think the idea is, even though Michael, you know, was trying to go down a different path, the fact that the path he went down was becoming a soldier ultimately was part of what led him to, like, if he had become a baker, I don't know if, you know what I mean? I don't know if he becomes the Michael Corleone we see in this movie.
Yeah.
But the fact that he became a soldier.
It is interesting because one of the through lines through the book is the idea of destiny.
Yeah.
And then like a man only has one destiny and he's going to arrive at that destiny no matter what. And the interesting thing about him, like your analysis that like his being a soldier is what starts him down this path, is that he enlists to try to avoid it. Because his family doesn't want him to do that. And like his brothers and all of these other men, they get like fake doctors' excuses to not be able to enlist. And he goes off and he does it. Yeah. To try to get away.
Yeah. But like I said, I think that it is that destiny thing. It's like he could have done so many other things. He could have bailed out and, you know, ran away to Canada and become a fucking whatever. And the fact that he became a soldier and went to war and has all these traumatic experiences from war, which again are reflected in that very brief moment when that train sound is like that is peak that, I think is really interesting, and sort of again harkens back to the idea that all of this was inevitable, kind of. And I think it's also another reason I love this movie is because I think it does kind of tie into my own personal feelings about like free will and determinism and shit. There's like Michael Corleone could not escape this. Like, I mean, he tried and he could to some extent, but like, this is the environment that he was raised in. This is all of this stuff so much of this was out of his control that even the stuff he tried to control ultimately didn't matter. And I think that's just it's so fascinating. I don't know. It's really interesting. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, to wrap up that point about chuds is this movie thinks you're stupid. This movie's not even thinks you're stupid. That's the thing that's kind of funny. I think this movie kind of thinks you're cool, but also that you're going to die sad and alone, which there you go. So, which I don't know. Here's the thing. if Michael Corleone doesn't die sad and alone in whatever God, I think there's only 3 of them, right?
Yeah.
Godfather 3. I'm calling my shot. Michael Corleone dies sad and alone, like in his office or something. Like he's like sitting in his office and he's like succeeded
Yeah.
as the Godfather. Like he's done it. He's succeeded. But he's alone. He's just completely alone. Just nobody. Everybody that he cares about, everybody that he's ever loved, anybody that he cares about at all is just gone. I mean, based on where this movie ends, if that would be my guess for where this series ends. I mean, like, optimistically, like, it would go a different direction. Like, he would get out of it at the end of Godfather 2, and then it would go. But I'm just guessing he dies sad and alone. And Chuds still don't know that this movie is about how what he did is real, not, he made a mistake. He's done fucked up. A couple more points. James Caan's performance in this movie for me, I don't know if you felt this way. James Caan, who plays Sonny or Santino, his performance, real up and down for me.
Yeah.
Some scenes, incredible. I was like, wow, so good. A couple other scenes, and I don't even have exact notes and details of when, but there was like 2 or 3 moments in this film where I was like, is this your first time acting, bro? Like, I was like, what? I was so confused. Everybody else in this movie is brilliant the entire time. Like, everybody else in this movie is perfect. And then his performance was just like, ugh, not my favorite. Speaking of great performances, obviously Marlon Brando's performance is one of the most celebrated of all time, and it is really quite good. And the thing that really stuck out to me was how sympathetic he is as a character, which I was not expecting. And I think part of that is I went into this movie with a little bit of bias because I knew Chuds liked it. Like, I knew fucking shitty people like this movie. I mean, everybody likes it. Lots of people like this movie. So I tempered it with that. But I also knew that lots of shitty people like this movie. Mm-hmm. So I had I had my guard up a little bit going in.
Like me going into Fight Club.
Yeah. And that being said, ultimately I came out of it. I did adore and just was kind of awestruck by this film as a whole. But in particular, Marlon Brando's performance, which I actually think this might be the only thing I've ever seen Marlon Brando in. I don't know if I've
never seen A Streetcar Named Desire.
I have not seen Streetcar Named Desire. I actually don't think I've ever seen a Marlon Brando film other than this one, yeah. I could be wrong. There may be something that I've seen at one point, but I think this might be the only Marlon Brando performance thing. But he's so sympathetic, and that conversation he has with Michael in the garden, the one with the wine and stuff, before he dies, it's so good. There's this moment where he like forgets, like he says like, "Oh, we got to do this thing," and Michael's like, "No, we did that already," and he's just. And then the line about the wine is like, it feels like it borders right on the line where he's like, oh, I drink more wine than I used to. It borders right on the line, and especially in conjunction with the fact that we see him being forgetful about something, but also he has kind of a sense of humor. That line about the wine to me feels like this weird border between like, is he intentionally being funny about that, or is he's like sort of like weird senile humor, like how intentional is the humor of that line? Yeah, you know what I mean, from his character, and I'm not sure, and I love that about the performance. Like, I don't know how there he is in those final handful of scenes, and I just found that so enthralling. Like, everything about his performance I loved, and I just thought it was great. And it's so funny to me talking about this in 2022, having seen hundreds of movies in my life and just never having seen The Godfather. It's just so interesting to be so taken aback by a film that everybody has always told me is good, and I was just like, all right, fine, I'm sure it's great, I'm sure it's fine. And then I was like, oh, okay, all right. It's real good. It's real good, guys. And finally, I did want to make a note about the hair and makeup in this movie because this is 1972, and not that makeup and stuff hasn't been good for a long time, but in particular, Michael Corleone's makeup throughout this film, I thought was crazy impressive and very subtle. Like the transformation of him over the course of this movie, when we see him in that first scene, he's so boyish.
A babe in the woods.
Yes, so boyish and clean and just soft. And then by the end of the film, he looks. It's like the pictures you see of a president. You know, from their first when their inauguration picture to when they like leave office. It was like that over the course of the film, and it looked completely believable. And that's ignoring, and it's not even counting like the big prosthetics of like when he gets his cheek broken and all that sort of stuff. Like that's all really cool and like very impressive and looks great. And I think even Marlon Brando, like a lot of stuff on him, I think some of that was prosthetics. I don't think that was just his face. I could be wrong, but I think some of that was prosthetics. And just that transformation was so impressive. I was just blown away by it. And his hair goes from this very boyish cut to like looser and sort of carefree in Italy to like very styled and fucking rigid once he becomes, comes back to America and becomes, the Godfather and that sort of stuff. It's just everything so good. All right, I'm done. I'm done raving about. Again, spoilers. Godfather's a pretty good movie. Before we get to the final verdict, we wanted to remind you all that you can do us a giant favor by heading over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us there for $2, $5, or $15 a month. You get access to different stuff at each level. At $2, you get early access and ad-free. And new in 2020, every level of our Patreon gets access to our book notes. So as we're reading books, Katie or I, or both, depending on what we're doing, take notes as we read, and then we use those when we watch the movie so that we can compare and contrast and use those notes for the final episode. Normally, they disappear into the ether.
They go into a folder in my Google account.
They just build up in my Apple or my iPhone Notes app or whatever, because I take those notes on my phone usually when I'm reading. And they just kind of disappear into my Notes app. But we're going to, every level, $2 and up, you'll get access. We're going to publish those notes on our Patreon so that you can actually see what we talked about or what we were thinking about while we were reading the books, and what made it to the episode, what didn't make it to the episode, how stuff we thought about when we were reading the book maybe changed from where we got to in the episode. Thought it might be interesting. So yeah, that's going to be a new thing for 2022. If you go over to patreon.com and support us there. At $5, you get access to bonus content where every month we do at least one bonus episode. Most recently, we did a review of The Witcher. We also talked about The Grinch from Illumination. This month, we're doing Lilo and Stitch.
Lilo and Stitch.
So yeah, if you want to hear us talk about some other stuff that's not necessarily book related, you get that at the $5 and up level. And then at $15, you get access to bonus content. Bonus content and priority recommendations, where if you want to have us do something specific, a specific movie or book, you pay us $15 a month on Patreon. You can request that, and it will go high up on the list. And in fact, this one was a patron request. Katie, who requested this one?
This was a patron request from Kelly Napier.
Yep.
So thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly.
We had a very good time with this episode.
Finally gave me an excuse to watch The Godfather.
And I'm thinking now maybe we should do some bonus content where we read aloud from bodice rippers.
I think we should do that. I'm into it. We got to find bad. What we talked about. What was an episode we did recently where we talked about we should read bad.
That was like bad Christian romance.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that would be fun. We should do bad Christian romance. But either way, anyways.
I mean, those won't be bodice rippers, but.
True. It would still be fun. Maybe we just do a bad anything romance. But yeah, bad romance podcast would be. All right. Now I'm getting ideas. Put a pause on that for now. It's time for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
When we recorded the prequel episode for this, I mentioned that I knew 2 things about this story. And then later on, I thought of a third thing. So I knew 3 things about this. And those things were, I'll make him an offer he can't refuse, the horse's head, and you come to me on this the day of my daughter's wedding.
Those are like the same 3 things I knew.
And then literally everything I knew about this story happened in the first 70 pages.
Yep.
Leaving me with 373 pages of flying completely blind. This book was very different from what I thought it would be. The only thing I can think to compare it to, with the caveat that I've only watched the show and not read the books, is Game of Thrones. You get every single character's backstory, and the focus is on power, who has it, who wants it, and what everyone is willing to do for it. Except that every single power-hungry ruler in Game of Thrones just thinks they're Vito Corleone. If the Godfather existed in Game of Thrones, none of those bitches would have had a chance. There's a lot of racism and a lot of sexism in this book. I genuinely do not know if Mario Puzo was making commentary or if his goal was to present a specific world in a manner that he felt accurate. I like to think that it's commentary. I don't know for sure. The movie cuts most of those things. The thing that it keeps is the story of the end of Vito Corleone's time as the Godfather and Michael's descent into his father's world. And for the most part, the movie's depiction of that storyline is true to the book. What the movie primarily cuts are Johnny Fontaine's storyline and pretty much everybody's backstory. And while the material that was cut from the film often felt superfluous and questionable in its racism and sexism, it was fascinating. The movie, very, very good, and obviously a masterclass in filmmaking, as you've said. But the book really grabbed a hold of me and dunked me into this world whether or not I wanted to be there, much like Michael becoming the Godfather. And for that reason, primarily, I have to give this one to the book.
I was going to comment, and then you went out there and dropped that banger of an ending. Yeah, I totally makes sense. My thoughts on the movie are well documented at this point. It blew me away, but it sounds like the book, and I think what's really interesting is that I think we had similar-ish experiences in the sense that I don't think either of us went into the movie or the book for you, the movie for me. I don't think either of us went into them expecting to like love them.
Yeah.
Or like them or even like really be into it.
I was very surprised by this book.
Yeah.
It was not what I was expecting, and I was not expecting to be as riveted by it as I was. And even with all of its faults, which were numerous,
which were legion,
it was still riveting.
Yeah. And yeah, I felt kind of similarly about the film, that I did not go in expecting. It's one of those things where part of it, I think, was, you get told a million times.
Yeah.
This thing's great. Yeah. And you're like.
And it feels overrated even though you've never actually seen it.
Exactly. It felt overrated even though I'd never seen it. And having seen it, I feel like I can say it's pretty accurately rated. Like, I don't know. It's not my favorite movie. Like, I actually don't know if I would ever even want to watch it again. Maybe once or twice over the course of my life, I would watch it again. It's definitely not something I would want to watch every couple years or anything like that. But I do think that it's pretty close to accurately rated. Like, if I was going to categorize this, among the films that I've seen that I would say are the best examples of filmmaking that I've seen. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean, just to be clear, my favorite movies. It just means the movies that I think are maybe the best examples of filmmaking that I've seen. This would definitely rank among the very top. It would be very high in that regard. Just among all the possible categories, from performances to shots, or, cinematography, makeup, hair, sound, everything, almost everything. Just, it would be very high up there. And I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to be like, kind of like when I watch Citizen Kane and I go, I get it.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. I get why people like it, but whatever. But that was not my experience with this movie. My experience with this movie was, I get it. Holy fuck, I get it. Like, it was a very fucking good movie. Very fascinating. And I'm very glad that I did finally watch it. So, Katie, what's next?
Up next, we are tackling something that was, this is another patron request. I don't have that patron's name right.
We'll talk about it,
but we'll
later.
talk about it in the next episode. We will be doing I Am Legend, a novella by Richard Matheson and 2007 film.
Senior year for me. I saw this senior year in high school.
I've never seen it before, and I had fully intended to never see it.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Yeah, I can tell you now, I don't know when it happens. I've seen this movie. Like I said, I saw it senior year of high school or whatever. It's the only time I've seen it once. There's a moment that I'm going to have to smother you with a pillow.
You're going to have to put a box around me.
I'm going to have to smother you with a pillow for about 30 seconds or so, or in that ballpark. And then I'll be like, okay. And we're in a farm upstate now. All right, moving on. So yeah, but yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I'm excited to watch this again because I remember enjoying it. But this was definitely in that period where I wanted every movie to be like an action movie, and this is not an action movie. It's much more of like a drama.
Yeah.
Like sort of.
Well, we've already done one
piece.
Richard Matheson property.
Yeah.
Which was Kevin Bacon Ghost Man.
Stir of Echoes.
Yeah, that's what that was called. And I did not particularly enjoy that book, but after that episode, we got quite a few comments about like, oh no, you have to do I Am Legend.
Yeah.
It's blah blah blah. That one's his best, and I'm like, okay, all right, we'll see.
We'll
see. I'll be the judge of that.
It should be interesting. I'm excited to watch it again. Apart from the moment where I'm gonna have to murder you, but. To spare you, but other than that, I am excited to watch this again because I do remember enjoying it, and I think I will enjoy it even more now. So until that time, in 2 weeks when we're talking about I Am Legend, and in 1 week we're doing our prequel episode where we're previewing I Am Legend and doing our fan reaction for The Godfather. So if you have stuff to say about The Godfather, if you want your opinion heard, please follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're going to put up a post. You can comment on it about The Godfather, and we'll read it on the show and talk about it. Go do that for us because I'm interested in this one. I want to hear what people have to say. I'm interested in all of them.
Please say things.
I'm interested in all of them, but this one I'm particularly interested in. So please go do that. And until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, everybody else,
keep reading books.
Keep watching movies.
And keep being awesome.